Okay, good afternoon. Great to see everyone. Welcome to INSEAD. Great to see you all. Welcome to the INSEAD Future Forum. I think it's going to be a very interesting day today, talking about AI and Web3 technologies. If you're coming in, please find a seat. I should introduce myself. My name is Jason Davis. I'm an entrepreneurship professor here at INSEAD. I study everything related to digital. So I teach classes on digital entrepreneurship, crypto, and of course AI. It's been an amazing 10 years here in Singapore teaching and researching about these topics. Just really exciting times in both of these domains. I'm really passionate about digital transformation at all levels, both for startups, mid-sized companies, growing companies, as well as big corporates. I do research on mobile apps, social media, crypto, and of course, generative AI. So, can you make your life more interesting than studying about all these topics? So that's what I do. The Future Forum here is a very exciting series that we run. We've run Future Forum events in Paris and London and other places. We always try to bring together people who really are studying or doing research or practitioners and managers at the forefront of technological revolutions to help us really try to understand the future, what may actually come in each of these domains. So thank you all for attending this one in Singapore, and I think these will continue to great effect. Today, of course, we're focusing on Web3 and generative AI. I think we're going to have a very interesting set of conversations and panels. We'll do a deep dive into generative AI to try to understand this big new paradigm shift, right? It has been amazingly fast. Now, it's not like AI doesn't have a long history, but I think everyone recognizes that the past year has been, or say 6 months, has been just incredible in its level of adoption. Probably only matched by one other thing recently, which of course is crypto, blockchain, and Web3. So these two areas just seeing a lot of adoption, a lot of interesting use cases, creating a lot of value in society, for companies, and for entrepreneurs. So what we're really going to do today is explore these two landscapes, where they currently are in their evolution, both Web3 and generative AI. What are the possibilities? What are some of the challenges? How can companies and entrepreneurs actually create and capture value in these spaces? We're going to try to make this as interactive as possible. These are panel discussions, but we're going to leave time for Q&A so that you can ask the questions you would like to. So at the end of both of our two panels, there will be Q&A. There will be a nice break, as well as a reception at the end. So hopefully lots of opportunity for you to interact with the panelists and get your questions in. Now, you cannot do an event like this without a lot of very good partners. Okay, so this is all about collaboration, and I'd like to introduce my main partner here, and that is Juliet Kelsko. Yes, please stand up, Julia, if you'd like to. She is the founder of Global CXO that specializes in Web3 and actually other emerging technologies. Now, Juliet is a member of our INSEAD family in many dimensions, okay? She's an entrepreneur in residence here, as well as has completed the executive master's in consulting and change here at INSEAD, one of our premier programs. So Juliet, of course, has worked closely with us and digital at INSEAD, with Pascal and others, and working hard to really ensure that we have a really great room today, and really nice event with terrific panelists and speakers, and help us to understand these disruptions. So an event like this, there's a lot of hard work that comes before, so I think we're really appreciative of that. And with that, the great thing about being a professor is you make the introduction, then you can step aside, and hand it off to all the other smart people that are doing things. So with that, I'm going to just hand it over to Juliet to introduce, the first panel on Web3. So, Juliet.
Thank you so much, Jason, for launching us into this forum. on the future of finance. We're very happy to see all of you here. Thank you for dedicating this afternoon to us, coming all the way to INSEAD campus. We're happy to host you here. Let me run quickly through the flow of the forum. So the first thing will be the panel on AI. And before we will actually launch into that, a bit of a housekeeping. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, the easy logistical stuff. Please make sure your phones are on mute because it disrupts the panel, as you know. I'm sure you saw a wonderful NFT salamander collection downstairs. You were forced to make a picture. Please share on social networks. Let's make a bit of a buzz about that. And I want to really thank, as Jason mentioned, the team of people who worked together for a few months to make it happen, which is, first of all, Digital INSEAD, Pascal, who is sitting here. She's hiding behind the themes, but can you please stand up? And a round of applause for you, please. So what we mentioned, what INSEAD Digital is doing, they run a physical conference once a year on every of the campus of INSEAD. They did a very interesting event in Paris on NFTs and luxury in crypto and Web3. They're doing an event in Abu Dhabi, and that's the one we organized together with them. And we will start from the panel on generative AI, which will be moderated by Professor Jason. We will introduce the panel later on. Then we'll have a short break from 4:30 to 4:50. Then we'll do the Web3 panel with some closing remarks later on, and the networking cocktail. And we invite all of you to join us and stay with us till the end. And all the panelists who can stay for the networking part, they will be there. So you will be able to ask them any questions you would like to. Plus, for the questions which you would like to ask for the panel, we want to ask you to make it as short as possible, as condensed as possible. So it will not take a lot of time, but you'll get a lot of answers you're looking for. And we are ready to start. And I would like to welcome Professor Jason again on the stage. And the panelists for the AI part. Oh, sorry. Yeah, my apologies. The opening keynote will be done by Rishi Ramchandani, and he spent the first decade of his professional career in different roles in tech, trading, and sales within the banking sector. And during this forum, we will ask every speaker to share their personal story, how they got into Web3. So partially I'll talk about this. If you want, you can also add a few words about that. So after doing his banking career, he ventured into his own passion which is dedicated to the financial literacy and crypto. And then he's been working in Web3 space since 2015. He was the head of Asia Pacific for BlockFi, and currently he's head of Web3 at Google Cloud. Please welcome on stage, Rishi.
So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me at this event. Yeah, thanks for the intro. As a quick follow-on to that, yes, I run Google Cloud's Web3 specialist team over here in APAC. First part of my career, I spent over a decade at Merrill Lynch, and then I've been involved in the... Hey, is this better? Okay. Where was I? All right, yeah, so I spent the first 10 plus years at a bank, and then been involved with the Web3 space since 2015, either at my own startup or somewhere else, and currently at Google. So Google's obviously at the forefront of AI, so I've been fortunate enough to be at the epicenter of this current revolution. So where really are we in this Web3, in this AI journey? We have essentially entered the Industrial Revolution 4.0. So this era is largely defined as the intuitive interaction between humans and technology. And just to be clear, this is multimodal, right? So we're talking about text, audio, video, images, and so forth. And if it isn't already clear, generative AI is going to have an impact on every single industry. The rate at which we're seeing this technology diffuse into all industries outside of software alone is entirely unprecedented. We've seen this with the widespread adoption of tons of consumer-facing applications. And to give you kind of some context, cloud as a business is a $400 billion market growing at 15%, expected to hit 1.5 trillion by 2030. AI, on the other hand, is a $100 billion market, but expected to hit that same 1.5 trillion by 2030. So you have AI growing at 2.5 times the speed of cloud. AI is essentially poised to become the operating system for information moving in the future. And it's important to note that these technologies can be really expensive. So, people need to focus on solutions that reduce costs and increase revenue. As we enter this industrial revolution, we have to remind ourselves that this market, very similar to Web3, is still very early. It's still very unclear and ill-defined. There's really no consolidation that has taken place just yet. And what we're seeing is companies have FOMO. And it's okay to have that because it gets you a foot in the door, but people need to be careful as they invest time and money into an area that has big business impact in a very experimental way. So if you look at conversational interface, there's no doubt that it's coming. In the early 90s, we had the GUI, and then web showed up and we moved on to HTML, and then there was the mobile revolution. There's zero question that the conversational interface is going to exist on every single product. And the conversational interface is going to be the new user interface going forward. So there's really two types of AI that is coming to the public, right? You have the consumer side and you have the enterprise side. On the consumer side, it's things like Bard and ChatGPT, where it's really like Google search on steroids. You can ask it to help me plan a 3-day trip to Laos, and you will get more precise and generative results. And this is great for consumers. Enterprises, on the other hand, have a completely different set of requirements to consumers. And they're concerned about how to control the data that they own. So as an example, I'm sure a lot of you have seen, but a lot of large banks over here, all over the world, including Singapore, have been shutting off access to the employees for these consumer products. And it's because they're concerned about what their employees are asking and the information they're sharing to these models. So enterprise AI technology offers you that control of your data. So there's really four main concerns for enterprises, right? So the first is information access. You don't want organizations to know what data your large language models are being trained on. You don't want other organizations to have access to that data. You don't want them to know the output. You want end-to-end sovereignty of your data, and that's super important. The input, the training, the output, all of that needs to be secure. The second is data control. The other thing that's really important is how you actually control the data. So most Web3 companies, financial companies, they have first-party data, second-party data, even third-party data. And so, it's not all their data. Organizations need to really think about how they control that data that goes into these models. For the third one, we have fraud and security. There's going to be a whole generation of technology and service providers that are going to red team these models. Fraud and security is extremely important in regulated businesses and industries such as finance and Web3. You need to prove how you actually got that answer, and it's really important in the context of enterprises. And then the last one is integration. You want to be able to integrate existing data and content, and it needs to be easy to integrate into existing environments without having to build net new connections. Look, the reality is no one really knows exactly where all this is going, but what we can do is look at what's being built at places like Google, but more importantly, where we see customers and where we see actual people building. And there's 4 areas that we see trending right now. So there's AI that is really making a huge amount of data. AI is really good at making a huge amount of data searchable and summarized. So it'll bring you insights and trends in a time-saving manner, improving that time to value. Another way we're seeing it is when humans interact with machines, you can now really make it more intuitive and smooth by using natural language. And it becomes very hard, if not impossible, to detect a human from AI nowadays. So we're seeing a lot of this around customer service. The third is around content generation. Again, it's multimodal. So we're talking about text, image, video, music, code, so forth. So AI can really help the productivity over here and maximize this. So if you're a coder, you have a simple quick start. If you're a designer, you have some samples to get you started with. So over here, we're looking at maximizing employee productivity. And then finally, this is a bit more complex and maybe a longer term horizon, is AI practitioners. So we're taking a model, integrating them with the company's data and flows, fine-tuning them, and so forth. So let's look at how AI can be utilized within Web3. Keeping in mind the opportunities that we just talked about, we can create services that can offer personalized customer engagement. We can offer synthesized market and financial research. We could also use it to prevent scams and analyze smart contract vulnerabilities. We've seen people use AI to find the best time to send transactions for low gas fees. You can also use it to give customer recommendations, right, based on transactions and investments that the customer has made, as well as what's going on in the market. For the customer support side, it's super straightforward. We're seeing it across all industries. We can have an automated bot to help users create tickets. It's a wide use case, especially in Web3, and it's a relatively straightforward one. Imagine a centralized exchange recovering all the info they need to refund a transaction that you made by mistake. And then the last one is around content creation. So we've all probably seen that AI-generated NFTs are growing rapidly. Another example of content creation is where we're seeing firms use AI to create smart contract templates or other parts of code. So for all these use cases, fine-tuning models based on blockchain data or smart contract data will give you much better results. And that's why the ability to have adapter layers and be able to test these different models and fine-tune them is really important. So we'll look at a few of these use cases. The first use case is personalized financial recommendations. So, financial services, it could be crypto, that building that customer relationship is about developing trust. Today, most financial institutions have to make product recommendations based on very broad customer segmentation. And it's because they don't have the tools, right, to deliver that hyper-individualized, contextualized recommendations at scale. And this leads to ineffective marketing and reduced customer satisfaction. But with Gen AI, what we're doing is we're seeing financial services can improve that cross-sell and retention strategy by having one-to-one instead of one-to-many messaging. So it can tailor product recommendations via conversational language and provide customized offers to existing customers based on their behavior and spending patterns. Imagine today, instead of getting off one-off generic message, you can get a product-centric message that really focuses on a small data set that you've given them. So as an example for maybe crypto side, a message such as based on investing, it seems like you're exploring exotic products. Here's some structured products that we recently launched. Give it a try commission-free, and here are some tutorials. Or in a more TradFi sense, based on spending, it looks like you travel a lot, but you haven't maximized your credit card rewards. So with this card, you'd have enough miles to go to France. And the process to switch that card be seamless. Let's look at another one for capital markets. Having an investment strategy that can outperform the market is obviously a massive advantage, right? The research that needs to get you there is manual and time-consuming, and the process leads to long hours, burnouts, and slow time to insights. Generative AI can really act like a research assistant for analysts. It can sift through millions of transcripts, company filings, consensus estimates, macroeconomic reports, regulatory filings, and so forth, and quickly and intelligently summarize the key information there for you. So for example, today an analyst might perform research by searching keywords or reading through piles of documents. Instead, with Gen AI, you're really using it to find intelligent summaries and relevant documents populated for them, right? Helping the analyst focus the time on the most important ones, and also helps the analysts explore the impact of these events even more. So it just allows them to be more productive. Next, within retail, this could be, again, Web3 or TradFi. A challenge that we probably all faced is customer inquiries. Customer inquiries are very costly to serve. They're often led to frustrating customer experiences. Routine inquiries into back offices and so forth can take a really long time and be a very repetitive process. Gen AI can help a lot over here. So they can answer common questions, onboarding, different products, account balances, web app support, and so forth. And then do it in a far more conversational way, and then pass the chat to a human if needed. And so it allows for more strategic customer service interactions. Another one, as you're likely aware, paper is everywhere in finance, across underwriting, trading, lending, claims, regulatory processes, and so forth. So employees must parse through an insane amount of data and complex data sets too. Generative AI can really be used over here to identify relevant document sets, summarize, and explain the relationships to other documents. This hugely increases efficiencies and processing documents, and even flags potential risks, such as financial crime. And last but not least, very prevalent in Web3 is the regulation side. So currently, what happens as regulation changes, product and developer teams must translate that regulation into code and implement that code at scale. And it's challenging because regulatory guidance is extremely complex, right? So developers really what they have to do is go to the subject matters, translate that guidance to understand what implementations actually need to be made. It's also not easy to modify existing systems and integrate these, especially with trying to maintain security, compliance, and super tight deadlines. So what Gen AI is doing over here, it's helping developers understand the actual regulation, the underlying regulatory and business change need that will require the change of code. This gives developers context before they make technical changes, And then Gen AI can help in automating those code changes, helping to cross-check against code repository and provide documentation. With the Web3 regulation continuously evolving, we're seeing this as a big use case. I'll end with this. Like, every company that looks at AI and Web3 is at a completely different stage. And I think it's important to recognize the stage of company that you're in. And some are ready to embark that Gen AI and Web3 journey today, while some need foundational work to approach these situations. Exploration that will kind of enable them to more seamlessly adapt and implement these solutions. So you have to find the right use case, evaluate the business need, figure out where it makes sense to actually implement Gen AI and Web3. You pick a deployment strategy, from there test it and scale it. And it's important not to run into these head first. Recognize that every company is at a different stage and different path, and it takes time, right? It takes time to understand where you are on this journey and how it could actually be useful for your business needs. That's all. Thank you very much.
All right, welcome everyone. We have some great panelists. I will not do a very long introduction, but I did want to make sure to welcome our panelists. We have Lawrence Lewis, Director of AI Singapore. Thanks for joining us. We also have Alex Honchar. He's from Neurons Lab, Director of AI Engineering there. Zaid Hamza, who's Managing Partner at Future Law AI. Ling Chang is a founder and consultant, was at A01 Solar, and Vieng Patel, founder and CEO of Splore. So what you're going to see is we actually have quite a diversity of perspectives, experience, and viewpoint, but everyone here really is an expert in AI. So what I'm going to do is just start with an introduction and a question for each of the panelists and hand it over to them. So what I'll ask you to do is introduce yourself, maybe just a little bit about what you do in the AI space. But the question I'd really like you to all think or talk about is the question of what's the difference between AI and generative AI? And I mean that in a very specific way. AI has a long history. 30 plus years, okay? It has already had a major impact on the economy with tremendous use cases, many of them on the back end. Consumers don't know a lot about these things, but there has been a big impact. But we all know something new is happening, okay? Generative AI, ChatGPT, DALL-E, Midjourney, I could go on, These things are having a tremendous impact and a huge level of adoption. There must be something real here, something new, something tangible. There is a delta. And so what I want to ask your perspective on is, what do you see as the new thing? What new application, use case, or impact do you see from generative AI compared to what I'll call maybe old AI, if that's fair, okay? So an introduction and just your perspective on generative AI. Let me start with you, sir, Mr. Lawrence.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Afternoon, everyone. So my name is Lawrence. I'm Director for AI Innovation, AI Singapore. AI Singapore is basically a government-funded program to accelerate the adoption of AI in the local ecosystem, build AI talents, fund AI research, and so on. So I actually come from the industry. For the last 25, 30 years, have been in the high-performance computing area, open source area, analytics, and so on, with my last organization being acquired by Microsoft. And now in AI Singapore, I am the #1 employee, first to join and still in AI Singapore. People ask, why am I still around? I enjoy what I'm doing. For the Singaporeans here, this is my second national service. Working in the university, the pay is terrible, right? So my thoughts about AI and Gen AI, right? The really big impact I think will happen is not here yet, but I think it's maybe 2 days old for some of us lucky enough to have access to Microsoft Copilot, Office 365, and so on. Old AI was very bespoke. People interacted with it if you are using that system, or it's happening so far in the background that you actually don't know you're actually interacting with AI, like when you go onto Amazon and Amazon recommend you a book and so on and so forth, those recommendation engines. But Gen AI I think one of the biggest impact, besides all the great Gen AI startups that will have very bespoke solutions, to me is actually in the productivity side. It will be a game changer for all office workers, all working professionals that have access to an office suite that have Gen AI. All of a sudden, all of us will be 10x more productive. People who may not be that well trained with Gen AI would now be producing quality work as good as someone who is well trained today. But the person who is well trained, highly skilled today, will be producing much, much higher quality work, 10x, 50x, or even 100x what he or she was able to do previously. So I think that is one of the great leveling and incremental change that I think we'll see in the next 6 months, 6 to 8 months, with Microsoft Copilot, with Google Duet AI coming online, and everybody having access to that.
Oh, that's terrific. So you're seeing a huge impact, really a big impact. Fine, go ahead. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Vihang Patel. I'm the CEO of Splore. Splore is a Temasek venture working on building a consumer search platform. We focus more on our audience or users who consume a lot more immersive media, consumers who actually are more Gen Alpha, Gen Z, I would say, but I don't want to label things because that's also a problem. However, we are looking at how do we bring more multimodal media forward in what is a traditional search now, and how do we make it more easier for people to access that while also trying to answer more deeper knowledge-related questions, which all consumer search will probably do as a commodity now in the going future, thanks to the advancement that Gen AI is doing. I think I can echo Lauren's points around how Gen AI is different from AI traditionally, and many of us have had the good fortune of spending, at least for me personally, a decade plus in this particular space, specifically around data and seeing evolution of data. How do we solve the problems? In my own personal journey, I've seen a shift between how I built personalization models and recommender models 10 years ago. While they are all still very relevant today, and don't get me wrong, that is one of the strongest way to build those models today. However, we are seeing a lot more interesting angles to solve, for example, sparse data problems and traditional recommender problems being solved thanks to Gen AI, which is a big shift. But going into specifics into an area that is very close to my heart recently, which is on immersive media, I think while there is an element of how Gen AI is helping knowledge workers, there is a huge impact in the creative industry as well. And this means that, and when I mean creative and entertainment industry, I mean universally of every media and every type of media you consume which needed an artist to sit and build and create. And of course, there's a different level of quality depending on which studio it's coming out from. And you'll see a lot of leveling happening in that area as well. And as Lawrence mentioned, just like how productivity of an average worker is going to improve based on where the baseline he or she is today, you're going to see the same thing in the creative space as well. Yeah. There's going to be a massive shift, a push forward in the quality of the creative content that's going to come out. As a matter of fact, I had an interesting conversation just before the panel discussion here with Ling Yi around how this was already there for many years, and you could see many companies, especially in the newsreader app, news aggregator app, the smart ones like what ByteDance did, they have been using this similar technology for many years now, 7-8 years, and Toutiao still is doing that, where what you see is a very refined set of news and headlines which people feel is actually created by journalists, but it's not really. It's been there for 7-8 years now, a lot longer than even GPT-2 was released. However, what's happening now is the scale at which this can happen, the ease at which this can happen. So there is a whole shift in productivity, but then there is a whole new set of content, a whole new set of information that we'll be consuming, and this is multimodal, not just text, which I think is a big shift from the traditional AI.
Very nice. Interesting to hear the impact, not just on, we hear so much about knowledge workers, but to hear the creative industries too. Yeah. Zaid, please.
My name is Zaid. I'm a lawyer, right, by training. Just last week, my AI patent was granted by the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore. It's been a fascinating journey for me to go for a very deep dive on legal AI for the last 7 years, right, in particular. But what fundamentally has changed is when ChatGPT was launched, the biggest impact that I can share with you now as an industry practitioner is the average person today can produce a high quality legal agreement that meets the standards required. Don't be surprised. So as a practitioner, as a lawyer involved, the biggest impact that I've seen now is, just to give you an example, just about 1.5 months ago, someone in my client's finance department drafted an agreement which was near perfect. And I'm head of legal for a few companies. I am a project counsel for a few companies. But it is so fascinating, right? Okay, the trick is, of course, your ability to prompt with precision, right? That is the single most important requirement. So I think moving forward, for me personally, now that I have my AI patent granted, I also teach at the university, right? I teach programs on AI innovation, intellectual property protection. Then lastly, I do commercialization. Now, so the next stage, I think, in terms of the legal arena, as well as in finance, right, which is what we're doing today, I think in the legal sector, we will see greater access to justice. Now, the degree of professionalism and the rise in the standards, right, has been greatly accelerated by generative AI. It is amazing, right? And depending on your prompt, you can actually effectively replace lawyers. Effectively, right? Okay. The reason why I still feel that there's a room for high-value lawyering, and this is where the future is, right? We have not reached a stage in our technological history where generative AI can replace human judgment. So in my view, the guardrails that we need to look at for the future is how to ensure that even as we improve our level of efficiency and automation and provide greater access to justice, as a lawyer, now deep into AI, the big question for us would be how to ensure the guardrails moving forward. So overall, I'm very optimistic of the future, so I'm keen to hear my fellow panel members on what they see as the future.
Out of curiosity, I wonder how many of you actually, you think that you know what's the old AI and Gen AI?
What's a what? Oh, yeah.
What's old AI and what is Gen AI? Do you think that you know very precisely? And many, also like many of you, like you think that you actually know where we're going for Gen AI. Can I just have a view of this? And do you intimidated by how overwhelming this news is every day? I mean, you don't know where to catch up.
If you know, please tell me because, okay.
Okay, thank you. That's exactly the point, right, I want to make. So basically, this is an overwhelming topic, but I want to start with my background. I was a Chinese literature graduate, and I've been doing AI for 5 years in Microsoft and AWS. I recently left AWS. So first point here, I want to say that everyone here, we are on this ship together, and basically, there's almost no way to escape, right? So in my 5 years of doing AI business development in the region, I have to say that the chat with him was very helpful because basically people didn't bother engage me because they think AI projects are usually only earn this much money and take this much time to close. I don't know if you feel that. So basically I find it very, like sometimes it's very struggling in the beginning because in most of the customers, they will think, oh, AI, tell me the accuracy rate. Until Gen AI came, like ChatGPT, who cares about accuracy? So this is a shift, right? So if you ask me the real impact, this is what I'm seeing. So people starting to embrace that, yeah, this is fascinating, and we started to research on where we can use it instead of asking how good it can be right now. So it's definitely a change in my conversation with customer as well, but also raise a very important point in my mind that we have to know the limits and we have to know what it can do and it cannot do to better use it. So that's something that very deep in my heart, and I wanted to share a lot more about this area. So for now, I am building a startup. And we were basically discussing this, right? So now, because of Gen AI, English become the most powerful programming language. So what I'm building with my co-founder is how can we really make this happen to extract the knowledge from the company projects and then turn it from the business language into a developer-friendly language. So we kind of want to bridge the gap and streamline the software development process. It sounds very techy, I know, but basically this is the idea, to make English become a usable programming language in the future. So yeah, this is about me. Thank you.
Thanks, Ling. Yeah, Alex.
Thanks, everyone. I think it works, yeah? It will be hard to expand after all those thoughts. Being the last one makes me, I need to add something new here. So what,
We'll start with you for the next one. Okay.
Yeah,
Make it fair.
better,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm working on, I'm co-founder at Neurons Lab. We are a consulting development company. So basically we go to other businesses and help them to implement and build AI from scratch. And before Neurons Lab, basically I was doing same things by myself. I was teaching, writing research papers, coding, building startups. So Neurons Lab, so far my opus magnum, not the last one, I hope. And yeah, now I need to add something new here. Maybe I'll try to explain why we see this boost in productivity, why English is a new programming language, etc. So we all have seen so-called old traditional AI. It's like we use Amazon recommender systems. If you work with business, you use predictive systems, analytics, video surveillance, audio. It's not new, it's all, old AI. What we have new here is adding to this data that you have in Excel tables, in pictures and videos, audios, the text context. So now you do not have only images or only tables. You have image and chat, table and chat, and this is how you train accordingly. So the big explosion we see here, because before who can work with tables? Only trained analysts. Now you can just talk to the table. So it really unlocks the access to this analytical data to people who, just can use English as a programming language, as an analytical language. So I think this is the main, maybe technical reason for this big change, because with old AI, it's only for professionals. New Gen AI with the chat is nearly for everyone. And maybe this can be a useful metaphor for us for a discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Actually, I think that's a very insightful place to lead into the next question because, I think it accounts for the rapid adoption. If everyone can interface and use this technology through something as simple as natural language and chat, it just opens up so many possibilities. Across many industries, and we're seeing the industry diversity here from consumer up to enterprise. So of course, what we want to go to next are the use cases, right? Because this is a technology that is all about the value that is being provided through use cases. And you're all at the forefront of this. You've seen lots of use cases. So what I want to ask you is, either the best or the least good options that you've seen in terms of use cases that are really creating value, really enhancing productivity, things that you're seeing in your experience, either with individuals or with the companies or the government you work with. Just a few examples of use cases. Alex, I promised I would go back to you. I don't know, immediately you're going to talk again. Do you have maybe one good use case, or maybe you see one that doesn't work so well? I'll leave it up to you.
I think I want to show maybe a couple of brief cases in the niche of quantitative finances, fintech events, so we need to have something relevant. And I think we can think about this as a kind of horseshoe of AI applications from the old to Gen AI and traditional old quant finance applications like for trading, predicting prices, liquidity, whatever it is. What we have now in the middle and what I see happening really actively in not only quant finance but in investment management in general is taking a lot of the documentation reports, which is typically in the written form, and start generating summaries. So basically how to read the SEC report. Instead of reading 100 pages, you can chat to it and ask it and structure for your old AI. So you have a 100 pages report, you ask questions, structure it as a table, and throw it to your old AI pipeline. And this is a combination of generative AI because you chat to the documents, you somehow generate something, but it's still kind of leaning to the old traditional analytical framework. And of course, in the same industry, then when you have a good strategy, you need to communicate. And Rishi had a good case on the personalized emails. Also, what I see when you, as an investment firm, you want to engage your customers, you want to share something on a weekly, monthly basis, you can personalize those emails. You know what is in their portfolio, what is in their performance, what they care about. So your next email to your customer can be highly personalized. You can calm them down, you can share news that are relevant for their portfolio, not what is, general market news. So this kind of from this old AI to Gen AI, couple of cases.
Oh, those are very nice. Ling, go on.
So Alex just took two of my use cases away. Okay, so I think this is also an emphasis for you, right? So basically document processing and personalized email or even like the email supporting system is definitely also top of mind for FSI. So maybe I will jump ship a little bit to my favorite AI use cases, and I find it very fascinating for Gen AI, because everybody think about Gen AI, I think 90% you think about text. But something, because I'm from Taiwan, I do a lot of IoT and manufacturing account before. And one thing you can imagine, it is not easy to have enough defect photos when you want to help manufacturers to do a defect detection model, right? Think about this. And then for Gen AI, you can actually generate various different data set for defect in order to train a better defect detection model. So for me, that was like a real industry deep use cases for Gen AI that I think is really worth to bring out, and I think giving some more variety of the Gen AI cases that we were talking today.
Yeah, it's very easy to forget that actually this revolution started with images. It started with DALL-E, really, right? Even though it's a language model, it's a language, the insight was that language could be the universal representation for everything, even images. Of course, ChatGPT came next, so. Saeed.
I'm going to share with you real life. I'll continue my earlier story, right? Okay, so as of today, right now, right this very moment, right, everybody can be a lawyer. Seriously. But of course, with the usual guardrails, right? You can draft an agreement, but I gave you a real life example of how wonderful LLM models are in the context of legal. It can even help you with nuances, okay? Now, if you just prompt in either ChatGPT or Bard, right, you get a very decent answer, which by my standard, because I've also taught at the law school, right, pass, right? But really what makes good lawyering, and in the context of finance that we are in today, right, I'll just choose another example. When you're in a finance department, say working in a large bank, regulatory compliance is a must, something that you really have to do. You ain't got a choice, right? If you mess up your regulatory compliance, it's going to lead to major losses. So the state of development in terms of the availability of LLM that can be customized to suit your organization have reached such a phenomenal state today. So organizations with their own huge private data, right, can leverage on the large language model created by ChatGPT to become the true creator of their own content, but still within a personalized context. Now, I'll give you an example of a clause, right? So, for example, when lawyers get instructed, right, one of the first things we look out for is indemnity, right? This is how we are trained, right, as a transactional lawyer. But do you know that in ChatGPT as well as Bard, they are able to distinguish between different forms and nuances of indemnity? I keep testing it, I keep pushing it, right? And if you compare the situation, say for example, 1 year ago, right? Because OpenAI was just launched last year, around November 2022. It has reached such an advanced stage. Okay, now so worst case scenario, right? I will urge you, never attempt to just rely on ChatGPT, right? There's still some room for lawyers to play.
Yeah.
So my advice is, despite the innovation that you have access to, despite the level of efficiency and productivity, I would still urge you, never rely on it completely, right? We've not reached a point where you can completely depend on it. And I think it's essential for us to strike that balance. But on balance, I'm still more optimistic than I am pessimistic.
Very nice. Let me just comment on that, because it makes me think that our professions probably need to fundamentally change how we think about content generation. And I'm also in a content generation profession. Being a professor, I write research papers, and I can tell you when ChatGPT came out, there was a lot of conversation about people cheating using ChatGPT, having it write papers for them. That conversation shifted very quickly to, how can I use ChatGPT to effectively write papers? It became very optimistic, but it was pessimistic at first. But I think that fields like law and academia, they probably need to shift to realize that this is a tool that can be utilized, but we also need to use our professional judgment to monitor. Yeah, very nice. Go ahead.
So this is I'm going to talk about the use case a little philosophically first, and then we'll dive into it. So I don't know how many of you have read this really old book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, right? In the book, there's a very interesting machine. They call it the Babel fish, right? And it's a universal translator. And it's supposed to help you guide through the whole universe and then translate in different alien languages, right? And it's a very fascinating machine. And at least I thought when I read it first as a kid, I was like, I don't know how that'll ever happen, right? Really. I mean, that's one of those fiction you can't imagine actually becoming real in the form that it actually is, right? Or at least it's been described, right? What I really find fascinating is Gen AI makes that possible. And translation has been there, right? Like, don't get me wrong. Like, Google Translate has been doing a phenomenal job for a decade plus now. But it's different. And what I mean different in the sense that it's truly a universal translator, not only between human languages, but also from human to machines. And I think this shift is very, very critical. And when you think about that shift, and you try to extrapolate that in the right way, and then you bring it down to day-to-day use cases and keeping with the theme of, let's say, finance, right, itself. What I find it very fascinating is this ability to actually now have conversations or have English or languages now enable processes to be executed based on this. And I'd had the good fortune of spending a few years in fintech myself, and I can tell you it's one of the most finance in general, like credit, lending, so on and so forth, is a very laborious process even right now with all the tech, because there's so many human element to it still involved. And creating that bridge, truly there are very few companies in the world have actually done it, and actually I still feel that a lot of people involved in that needs to be in this business. And primarily because there's so many subjective element, abstract element that machines can't process in the way it's traditionally been designed. And I think that's one of the big shifts I would imagine, that a lot of the regulatory overhead, the barriers that have existed in finance will get thinner. I'm not saying they're going to go away, but they're going to get thinner, which allows for a lot of interesting new companies to now start coming in to the space which was harder for them to do, or it took a lot longer for them to go to the market. For example, one challenge that I faced in the past in fintech was growing from one country to another country. Massive, huge issue. It's not scalable. Southeast Asia is not scalable. Most of us know this by now. But you can't just simply take a fintech from Singapore and transport that into Indonesia or Vietnam, right? There's so many different elements to it involved from a local regulatory standpoint, as well as from just data and then how do the processes work. And this becomes very real, and this becomes actually doable because you can translate your processes into regulatory structures which are written in English, and being able to translate back into some sort of an API conversation that you can actually have. Now, this is a little far-fetched at this point. Now, it seems a little far-fetched, but it's not that far in future, because APIs are already conversating with English language today. right? And with what OpenAI just released yesterday, that's becoming more and more accessible and easier to the point that you don't have to even build it outside in your own systems. You can do it in that same environment and actually bring that conversation forward. And I think that's very fascinating for me. So almost the company that I had built 6-7 years ago, I can reset that entire process in a much shorter time span than I had to, including time and money involved to the same business. And specifically, I can tell you, I can talk about it at length in lending and credit for that matter, right? And I think for me, that part, the universal babel fish in the truest sense, is probably the most exciting part of this journey.
Yeah, hey, I think the metaphor of a universal translator seems spot on, right? I mean, and like you said, it's not just between human languages, it's between human and machine languages. I can't help but bring up, I don't know if you saw that X, Twitter, whatever we call it now, just Elon just released the X.AI, their version of Grok, which also comes from science fiction. But Elon said that they gave it a kind of a spicy personality. And so apparently the rumor is that they instructed it to act like Babelfish. Oh, right. Yeah, to have a bit of that edge, because they felt that ChatGPT and Bard were too boring, so give it a little bit of an edge. So apparently, this is coming back to haunt us, So, but yeah, very nice metaphor, yeah. Lawrence.
Okay. So maybe we'll just take one step back, right? What is this ChatGPT? What is this GPT, right? It's pre-trained. It's a pre-trained model. It means that OpenAI, Google, and so on has actually trained a model on nearly all the publicly available data. So that's the reason why, with a little bit of additional training that all of us can easily do through showing it maybe 1 or 2 or 3 examples, it can then understand what you want to do and give you the right results. So in AI Singapore, we do a lot of projects for the industry, and one of it was relevant to this today's topic, was in finance for one of the banks, and was to read sustainability reports and figure out that, okay, this company has a sustainable plan, and therefore recommend to their high net worth client, Mr. So and so, Apple has planned for this. I think it's a good time to buy shares or stocks of the company because of their sustainable plan. It was a 12-month project. Obviously, the integration part is non-trivial. You need to integrate into whatever the banking systems. But just extracting the information, massaging it, and then getting the data out and getting the information out took several months. With what OpenAI released yesterday, it could be done over a weekend. Okay, so what we are seeing now is that with Gen AI, and especially what folks like Google and OpenAI is doing, what we previously did with NLP AI projects that took months is now could be shortened to a couple of days. It's tremendous savings in that sense. Another 2 project, one personal, one is an actual project. So let me share the personal one. So a couple of months ago, I was asked to do a video shoot, and they say, okay, let's plan out something so that the producer will come down and can walk through with you and so on. And given that most producers have no idea what AI is, I say, okay, why don't I craft out the scenario? I went to ChatGPT. I say, okay, I'm going to do I need to do a 10 minutes video shoot. Please help me craft out something. It actually generated a proper script that I could hand over to the producer and say, why don't we do something like this? And when she looked at it, she understood, because it was a script that was in her language. It was, speaker will say this, position the camera here, and then a producer, you should do this, and so on and so forth. So it was something that basically allowed me and the director or the producer cut down the amount of interaction and discussion time so we could get right to the point, okay? Now, through a Another project that is really happening today, one of the big programs that AI Singapore has is our apprenticeship program, where we bring in working professionals who actually are prepared to quit their jobs, come in and dedicate 9 months of their time to deepen their skills and become an AI engineer. And as part of the process, we actually have to test them in coding. They can use ChatGPT, no problem. We'll have to figure out whether they understand what is being written. But whatever it is, they will have to submit a script. So it's a take-home script, so it's like 4 days, 5 days. We give you a data set, this is a set of questions, you submit your Python code, your pipeline. Increasingly, our program is getting more and more popular. We started with maybe 100 Singaporeans who apply, and today we're looking at 300 to 400 who apply. And of that, we'll get 60–70% of them actually submitting code. My engineering team have not grown 4 times. We are still at 40–50 engineers. And not all of them are going to evaluate the code because we do 3 batches a year. So everyone takes turn. So we have 10 to 15 engineers that will evaluate the 200 scripts coming in. And we say, okay, it's not going to be scalable if we want to increase the number of intake. So we actually now built a LM to analyze the scripts coming in, right? Rate it, because we actually know what we are looking for in each of the questions. We are able to rate it, score it, but importantly, we actually give the feedback to the person who submitted the script to say, well, this part you didn't do so well, you should consider this. And the reason why we want to give very detailed feedback is very simple. Most of them will not pass, but they now know what they did not do right. They can go back and learn, and then they apply for the next round or the round after. So that is using Gen AI, and that's something that we have actually already used for our current batch 15, and we'll continue to enhance that.
Yeah, these are great examples. It seems to work particularly well when, of course, you have a lot of content or potential to generate content, but you actually know the criteria that you want. And this is important because I think many of us, when we started playing with ChatGPT, it was very rudimentary. You know, what should I cook for dinner tonight? Or what's a great vacation I can take in ASEAN? But when you bring your professional expertise and the requirements and goals that you know, suddenly you start to get very insightful, answers. It's quite amazing. Okay, so obviously we've been very optimistic. I think you have 6 optimists, up here. But we need to talk about the challenges, right? This is a new technology. Shouldn't be surprising that new technologies come with all sorts of challenges. Not just challenges of implementation on the organizational side, technical challenges. This is a unique one, though, where let's call them ethical or societal challenges are pretty apparent. So what I wanted to ask, of course, are about those challenges. And I'm going to leave it up to the panelists to interpret that question as they wish. You can talk about the challenges for companies, for individuals, for society, for governments, to deal with generative AI. But I would love to just hear what's top of your mind, when it comes to the challenges that generative AI seems to be presenting. And let me reverse it again. I can start with Lawrence.
So, yes, we are very enthusiastic and positive about it. But unfortunately, nearly all the large Gen AI companies are being sued by some organization, or a group of actors, right? So all of them are in various legal cases, mainly because a lot of the data sets that they used to train their model on, they are copyright, although a lot of countries do have copyright exceptions, but in a way, they overdid it, right? They just used without permission and trained the whole model. But does it mean that there is no way to do Gen AI in an ethical manner? At first, I thought, well, it was really going to be very difficult, and no. But about 2 months ago, I'm sure all of us here are familiar with this organization or company called Getty Images, which they are actually suing Midjourney and so on, right, for scrapping their images off the web. But they themselves has launched a Gen AI image generation service. But they have actually done it in a way, it has checked all my boxes for being ethical, being responsible, and so on. One, they did not scrape the data from the internet, they used their own data sets. And even for their own data sets, they went back to the creator for permission. Two, they actually put in a financial model to pay the creator when their data is being used. Okay? So to me, I think that's, can AI or Gen AI be ethical, unethical? That's not a discussion of algorithm. It's actually a discussion of business ethics. And Getty Images has shown to me a way of doing Gen AI in a very, very ethical manner. So much so that if, when they launch a service, I'm going to subscribe to them, and I won't use Midjourney and so on, because they are doing it the right way.
That's a very high bar. I agree with that. That's I dare say most companies will not take that approach, or they will try not to take that approach at least. We'll see what regulations come. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think in similar in a similar line of thought, I think for us as well, for example, being a search company, a consumer search company, we constantly kind of straddle between how do we make sure we provide a fair share to the publishers, because a large amount of internet is actually based on traffic being routed to these publishers' sites, so that they get their fair share, which is why there's an implicit agreement with the search engines, right? This implicit agreement with the search engines like Google, Bing, and everyone else is that you take my content, but you give me traffic, right? Now, if that disintermediation happens so rigorously the way Google and Bing are doing, then it questions whether that implicit agreement holds anymore, right? What do you do in that situation? And this is a big problem, right? It's a huge problem. And at the other end, you are seeing this proliferation of content creators, you're seeing proliferation of UGC happening at the same time, right? And that's also riding on the fact that people are going to be fair with the content and the data that they put out there. How do you actually give them their fair share and fair due as well? Because you can easily disintermediate a Twitch stream now by actually having a bot literally talking about it, which looks and resonates like your favorite character, your favorite influencer, and then you probably won't be able to distinguish between the two, right? I think this is a dilemma that we ourselves are actually thinking very hard about, right? You want to give the user the convenience of getting the answers, but you also want to give the fair share to the publisher, the creator of the content. And this, unfortunately, today, the mechanics of this business means that you have to route traffic, but then if that's not possible in a Gen AI world, that means you need to create new infrastructure, new apparatus to enable these businesses or publishers to participate in the Gen AI world.
Yeah.
And this is very critical element which people are forgetting that was the cornerstone of how the internet started, right? And I think that's the debate that we ourselves have been constantly grappling with. And I don't have an answer, and I think it's a big problem, which people not considering, assuming that the world's finite knowledge is already created and will be ingested in one place, and that'll be it, right? There's so much more knowledge that needs to be created still. And then you're curtailing that process quite dramatically, right? And I think for me, that's a very critical part of the problem that I think we'll be spending, at least Explore will be spending a considerable amount of time on in the future.
It does seem like a huge problem. I think it's easy to forget sometimes there will likely be multiple solutions, probably dependent on jurisdiction and countries, and different countries will take different approaches. I mean, it's easy to overly focus on the US where some of these things are coming from, but that's only one place, as we know well here. And I'm sure there will be some regions and countries that will take a very laissez-faire approach. We can probably guess who they are, okay? And it will be more of a Wild West. But then there will be other places with more, responsible models as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. It's pretty hard to predict. I think we're setting you up, the two comments on legal already, so just take it away.
Now I'm not going to talk about legal.
Good.
Yeah, deliberately not going to talk. Okay, my take on the challenges and the issues. I represent primarily small to medium-sized enterprise. Although previously I worked for three giants, including Microsoft, where I was a director for intellectual property. Now, the challenge that I see today, right, in the context of Gen AI, is how do we ensure that the economic and commercial benefits of Gen AI permeate all the way down to the ordinary smaller company. Now, if you look at the structure of any country, it's the same everywhere, right? The SMEs hire up to more than 90% of the population. They contribute to around 70% of the economy. Now, so the big challenge for me, the way I see it for the future is, how do we create a policy framework and an ecosystem that will benefit the SMEs in particular? So I think we will need to make investment in two areas. The first investment is investment in people. So I like to share my own story, right? I went back to the Singapore Polytechnic in my late 50s, right? So I was just hitting 60 years old, right? So I'm 64 now, right? I went back to the Polytechnic to study data science, including Python programming. Wow. My wife thought I was crazy, right? She really thought I was crazy, right? And so the point that I wanted to share is, we really got to think about how to reskill the entire professional-based population so that they can benefit from AI. And the last point that I wanted to share in terms of challenges, right, is the time to value, right? I think this is a key concept, right? The time to value, to create, to accelerate value creation in the shortest possible time will remain a challenge that we must all deal with, right? So should we invest in generative AI? My answer is absolutely, right? Should we invest in reskilling, such as, for example, to come to INSEAD to study? Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely, right? to me, it's a must, right? Because you really got to keep up with the latest knowledge. So at the end of the day, the question then would be, how do you ensure that you have secured your ROI? So I think at the end of the day, the investment that you put into knowledge capital, intellectual capital, I think would far surpass any kind of commercial investment that it has been very fruitful for me personally.
So let's hear your challenges from Alex and Ling, but I think we want to transition very quickly to Q&A. I think we can probably take a little more time in this panel since we started a little late, but please go ahead. Ling, go ahead.
Yes, I saw the signs.
Yeah?
but I do want to echo that because education is actually something made me almost, like, main reason I want to quit. Let me tell you why. Because Gen AI just let a lot of people imagining AI even further from reality. And I feel I spend most of my time as a business development educating my customer what exactly is AI and what exactly is Gen AI. So learning and reskilling is absolutely a challenge, but also super important in my mind. And like a very quick story. And so basically, I was sharing with one of my clients saying, you know what, LLMs right now is a zoo. There are hundreds of thousands of LLM. There's not just one thing called GPT or Llama 2 or whatever, you know? It's not like that. But those most famous ones are just like celebrity, but you do not need Tom Cruise to shoot your video, corporate video. That's overkill, okay? So after I said that, they still say, Ling, but my boss wants GPT. So I'm like, okay, fine. But that's the reality, you know. So please, I would urge that, you know, to learn the space and be curious. As I said in the very beginning in my introduction, we are on this trip together. So no one can actually escape. And I also share with my background, I have no technology background. So we are basically together. And to learn, to reskill, to really embrace this is the only way we can live through.
Okay, I'll try to advocate now for actually people who are building AI solutions, because there's a lot of talk about the responsibility, ethics, etc. And I think it's important to really boil it down to what do we really mean by being responsible, transparent, and ethical. Because actually when you boil it down to that you just need to be able to explain why you make this kind of decision, or to clean your data, or something like this, it's just engineering. It's like if you, I'm sure some of you are working with software products, you know that your software engineers are testing your products. There are QA engineers, software engineers, there are some tests, processes, and you don't release a website if you cannot click on a button. So it's basically just the same. You cannot release the LLM model if it will answer with some biases, or it will answer incorrectly. So you just need to implement some tests. And I think what is happening, a risky situation here, because what we see in the recent USA Act, they are trying to measure the inputs, not the outputs. So basically, when you build actual software solutions, you measure the outputs. You press the button, it should work in like this, is the output. What they're trying to regulate, they're trying to regulate the size of your model, number of weights, this kind of things, which is, in my opinion, incorrect. And as builders, we should advocate actually for responsible, transparent use of the outputs. What do we really want to build, and how do we protect and defend what we are trying to build? And eventually boils down to engineering. Just like you test your mobile apps and web apps, you can do the same with AI. So I want to be positive about builders, innovators, and let's defend our outputs, not just the size of the language model or something like this.
Makes sense.
Can I just my advice to the audience here, right? If you want to be an AI engineer, but looking at the audience, I don't think many of you will want to be. Go ahead and learn Python. But if you are going to be a product manager, you want to analyze data and so on, please don't learn Python. Seriously. If you want to analyze data, there are GUI tools that allows you to drag and drop and analyze the data. What you should be learning is how to analyze data, how to clean the data, how to fill up missing values, and if you want to use machine learning or prediction, how to use the right algorithm and split your data sets and so on and so forth, and understand what the algorithm output is, right? What is the F1 score and what accuracy means. None of those skills or knowledge require Python programming. There are GUI tools that allows you to do that. Absolutely. Today, or rather maybe the next 6 months, you may not even need to use these tools anymore.
Exactly.
Just upload the data files to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to analyze it. But you still need to know how to ask ChatGPT the right question. Please analyze it this way. Show me the chart. I want to see this chart this way. I want to visualize it this way, and so on and so forth. You still need to know how to work with your data. But you don't need Python programming, Java, R programming to do any of those tasks. So please don't learn programming just because you want to do analysis. Please don't get your staff to go learn Python programming because the universities are trying to sell you courses, right? Learn Python programming for data analysis.
1,000 Python courses just died thanks to you, Laurence. Thanks a lot. Luckily, we don't really teach that here. We want to open it up to questions. Okay, so how do we do this? I think we have the mics at the table. I think they work. Who would like to ask a question? And I will call on you.
My question is, what is the role of human accountability in this whole development of Gen AI, right? The panelists have made it clear that the fact that Gen AI is different from AI because it's now accessible to everyone. But then, how do we navigate the role of human accountability when Gen AI becomes the maybe more dominant in decision making across different use cases in organizations? And I'll just maybe stretch that a little bit to talk about self-driving cars, right? This topic that we've been talking about it for the longest time, but the implications of who is actually accountable if an accident actually happens, that doesn't seem to have been fully resolved. So do you see like some kind of framework, or what is it that we need to do in order to put in the right frameworks and governance to address this issue?
Just my personal opinion, might be really biased here, but I think who is responsible is a human and maybe corporation. So it's like who owns the AI as a software. Yeah. Who owns the AI could be individual, could be a corporation, some legal entity, they're responsible. It can be different value chain. So maybe Tesla uses OpenAI algorithm, and maybe in the legal contracts, OpenAI will be responsible for something, some part of the cases. But in the end, at least right now, the situation like this, and I think we should keep it like this, humans are responsible, or related organizations, which might change in the future. But I will not be advocating for this.
I would like to add, yeah, it's definitely, right? So imagine, let's say you need to write a report for your boss, and you use ChatGPT or Bard to generate a report, and there's error or factual errors. You cannot tell a boss, oh, it's ChatGPT's fault. Your boss will say, you are responsible for a report. ChatGPT is just a tool that helps you write the report faster. But you, as the human who is responsible for producing the report, will still be responsible for the accuracy of the report. Now, if ChatGPT didn't give you the right answer, they already have a disclaimer right there to say that they will hallucinate. So please don't, you can't sue them.
And in fact, this is the trend of all technologies, right? So when Excel and PowerPoint come out and you make an error in your Excel spreadsheet, you don't blame Excel, you blame yourself. And when, internal combustion engines come out and they break, you don't blame the engine, I should have repaired it, et cetera. So I think you're right, we're going to probably take this sort of path.
Sorry, can I just answer
please,
his question? Okay, just in case you have not been following, right? It's been more than 5 years since the Singapore government made a major strategic decision, right, to invest in AI governance. They have not only created the framework, the toolkit, the processes, they've spent huge amount of money just to ensure that everyone should get their act right from the start, which is creating the framework, then having the processes in place, just to ensure that things that might go wrong can be prevented. Now, the latest thing that they have announced, I think coming to a year now, is AI Verify. So the point about my sharing this with you is the toolkit, the framework, the methodology, the processes are all available out there. So at the end of the day, it's a question of how organization, led by executive, implement those things at the operational level. So I think the control measures are extremely key to ensure that you have, at the end of the day, trustworthy or responsible AI.
Great. Let's get a few other questions. Please, go ahead.
So amongst the governance issues, and I think I'm going to disagree with Alex here, is the auditing the algorithm so that it can be used and understood how it treats the data. And I think there is a difference between anything AI and Gen AI, because Gen AI keeps inventing itself, and the actual modern engine keeps morphing in a way. How do you keep audit of that? How do you keep track of that and trust?
Yes, I think that's a very important set of questions. When these models first came out, a big concern was actually bias. So we were seeing results that were biased in terms of gender, in terms of race. And what the companies would say is, well, it's not that the algorithm is biased, it's that's what's in the training data, right? The training data on the internet leans one way and not the other. But I think the companies soon realized, no, we have to be responsible for that too. Like, even though our algorithm is objective, if our training data is giving it a response that's inappropriate from some ethical standard, we need to take some responsibility too. So most of the companies are trying. I'm not sure the results are perfect yet, but they're trying to minimize things on that dimension. Yeah.
So I mean, following on that, right? So it's actually the data that's biased. The algorithm has, I won't say been audited, but algorithm is usually the same. Okay, it is a GPT algorithm and so on. But what changes is the data that's being fed into it. So there are various ways that people are auditing the output of such models. And I think one way would be, you have certain prompts and you expect certain fair enough, good enough output, and you feed it into the model and you see whether it comes up with that. It should be along that line. I think that's how people are going to build benchmarks and metrics to measure this sort of models, because the algorithm can't really, algorithm is an algorithm. Ultimately for AI, it is the data sets that's being fed in that will influence the model. It's not so much the algorithm. So it'll be auditing the whole process okay, auditing the whole process, which includes both the data, the algorithm, and how the model is being trained. So it's, unfortunately, we have to treat it as a black box. So you basically have a input and you expect this output. Are you getting this output? How far is it deviating from this output? And therefore, that's how you're going to measure it.
Hey, go ahead, Alex.
A super quick note. Actually, what you're saying is actually just a good and normal engineering process. Actually, when engineers are working, they study the data, they visualize it, they check the outliers. Again, if you're a good engineer, you do this by default. So people normally are doing these checks, they're designing the test cases. Maybe what is a bit more needed, like more standardization. We talk about like ethical responsible, what exactly do you mean? Can you give me a benchmark, a test? Because if you give us a benchmark test to the engineers, we will fit it perfectly. No, but it's true because
you optimize.
Yeah,
So
it's just
do
a
what you
process.
can.
So maybe what is needed is some kind of more objective criteria, not like, oh, you have to be ethical. Tell me what exactly is ethical.
Well, and in fact, we know actually, I think it was leaked that OpenAI spends a large amount of their variable cost on reinforcement learning by real humans checking the output and to fine-tune the model. And there's been a lot of debate about this, whether how much they should do, should they have more of an open model? And I think there will continue to be that debate. You know, there'll be different models, will take different approaches. But let's get another question. I saw someone way in the back, and I saw you had your hand up for a while. You'll have to speak up.
What kind of guardrails have you guys tried implementing to prevent hallucination? And do you guys have any recommendation on what tooling you will use to kind of keep track of this?
So this might be a question for those who have actually implemented some of these models, but I know you have, Alex. I don't know if others have played around. What sort of guardrails do you typically utilize? Yeah.
So I think it's harder to do in an open foundational model and set very strict guardrails. But when we look at how, like for example, in our case, and this is a little technical, but we kind of build our own ground up vector databases. We have our own proprietary RAG models, which has been in-house, which helps us actually understand how do we query the data set. We build our own embedding generation models, which helps us do it. So of course we leverage OpenAI, we use OpenChatGPT, etc. But because it's a very contained environment where we control everything that goes from the training and data set inputs, as well as how the models are actually being fine-tuned, you can actually define guardrails. The problem that fundamentally happens in hallucination is when the data is completely open. Let's say you say, okay, I'm going to scrape the entire wiki. I'm going to go to Reddit, and I'm going to take everything that's on Reddit, and I'm going to go to Twitter. I'm going to pick up everything that's on Twitter. I'm going to take the top 500 or 1,000 websites. I'm going to take everything there where you have no idea what you have taken in, which is really the problem with a lot of foundational model, is because there's just so much data unfiltered just going in there. And the beauty of the model is it can learn, it can train itself. And that's kind of where fundamentally the problem happens. You can't set good guardrails after the fact. You have to set the guardrails before the fact.
In the training process.
In the training process itself, and which is what they're doing now. They're actually retraining the models, right? It's an expensive process. Very few companies can do it. That's why they're raising billions of dollars, because they're redoing the entire thing now. Which is why Sam can boldly come out yesterday and say, copyright, I will pay for it if somebody sues you for it. Yeah. The only way you can do that is you retrain the entire model, you scraped all the data, you're confident that you know what's gone in, and that's how you change it. And hallucination in an open foundational model will always remain. You can't take it out. You can only do in specific subject matter. And this is why when we build models specifically in certain knowledge and topic, we start building hundreds of mini LMs, which are very well fine-tuned for that particular topic, and that can scale. So that's really the practical constraint of the knowledge or the process we know today. Maybe, I don't know, in future who's seen how things will change, and that could probably alleviate some of the problems.
Ling, do you want to go?
Yeah, I want to ask, are you asking from a user perspective or an actual project implementation perspective when you ask this? So
then you should find a way to chat with people, because I'm sure they can share lots of techniques. Maybe Ling, do you want to?
Because I actually wanted to talk about prompt as well, because sometimes it could be the prompt that you just need to, like understand how the LLM logic works to make it better. Not even touching the deep part, just how to use it. Sometimes just how you communicate with them will change, or make a lot of change.
Yeah, great. Let's take another question. Sir, this gentleman, I saw you had your hand up. Thank you.
Hang on, is this working? Can you hear me?
It does, yes.
Okay. It's really interesting to me how these things go through stages, right? And we're always talking about knowledge versus wisdom. We're always talking about, like, so when we're traveling and doing such, I don't care about the translation, I care about the interpretation. And so that enables me to go away and do things that I have to do. So how long before, in each of your opinions, do you think ChatGPT is before it becomes wise? Because it needs, I mean, you raised an interesting point. You've got to ask the right question to get the right answer. At what point does it understand you're not asking the right question? Because that's what it's all about.
I think if you watch the Open AI Dev event that Sam gave, they actually gave an example when the drive-through, the guy was trying to be funny with the AI and say, you know, he asked something that's nothing to do with Dr. Donut, right? And the AI responded, "Sir, I'm Dr. Donut." The guy was trying to say, ask him, I can't remember the question. It was something about AI or something, and it was actually a Dr. Donut, you know, ordering of donuts and so on. And the AI system says, "Sorry, sir, I'm just Dr. Donut. I can't answer your question." But I think, yeah, I think a year ago, or you know, when ChatGPT, I thought that, you know, it's just predicting. You know, my view was it was just predicting the next word and the word after. But over the last couple of months, right, as the models improve and people begin to find what they call latent behaviors and so on. And up to today, people still really don't understand exactly how these models work. But the fact is that to predict the next word, actually, the model actually has to understand the whole context. Yeah. Okay, so actually it's not just about just predicting one word. It actually understands the context before it predicts the next word. And on wisdom, I'm not sure whether you'll get there anytime soon. But I think in getting to a human level understanding, it has nothing to do with wisdom. I think you'll get there pretty soon. Maybe, you know, people are saying within the next 5 years or so. Okay, so I think we'll get there. But to your question about will such models get to wisdom, I think we have to define what's wisdom. And if wisdom is very, very human, I don't think models will be wise.
You know, some of you may have seen, I think it was 3 or 4 days ago, an academic paper was released. I thought it was very important about how these models cannot generalize past their training data. I think it was a Google research team, and it was a big conversation. And I saw for 1 or 2 days, everyone in the AI field was depressed because they thought these models should be able to generate novel things outside of the training data. And then I started to see people were happy because they realized these training data sets are huge. Everything is in the training data set, including wisdom. The problem is, just like in human society, it's probably very rare. So we just need better models to find that wisdom in the training data and you know, help us.
Among humans to learn from.
For sure. Okay, well, speaking of wisdom, the wisest thing we could probably do at this point is to have a break. Now, I'm very excited to hear this. I get to hand it over now to Juliet, who will moderate our panel. So let's give it up for these panelists. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Jason. Once again, thanks for everyone who showed up for this panel. I really appreciate your time. I know you all are very busy. And no pressure at all, because it was very tough to get all of you here, and we basically invited the entire Singapore. We can say that they all showed up, so no pressure on me. And as we discussed, I want to ask first our audience, what's their relation to Web3? So if I can have a show of hands in terms of who works in Web3 full-time. Higher. Thank you. Who is here just to learn more about that? More hands. Who went through the painful experience of buying crypto at least once in your life? Oh, people are not afraid to show it. Who is then trading crypto? Lending? Staking? We're not going to report it to IRS. Thank you so much. But now we know everything about you. So I want to start an introduction to this panel by inviting all of you, one by one, sharing your personal experience and journey, how you joined Web3, who initially brought you to the dark side, and when you decided to make this move and actually move into Web3 full-time. Who wants to start? Who's ready?
Sure. We can start this direction this way. Hi, everyone. Thanks all for making the time. Excited to be here. My name is Hassan Ahmed. I'm the country manager for Singapore at Coinbase. I've been at Coinbase for about 2.5 years. And some of my journeys that I was in TradFi for the early part of my career, then I was in payments and fintech, and then eventually in crypto. And I don't think I'll ever leave after this. I can't think of anything more exciting I want to be doing. So I moved to Singapore about 4 years ago. So the Singapore leg of my journey is that when I first moved here, I joined a company called GoTo Group, that time known as Gojek, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I was sort of given this dual mandate of running a strategy for GoPay, which is the largest e-wallet in Indonesia. Eventually was asked to look after a lot of the international operations. And at the time, Gojek had acquired a company called CoinsPH, which was both an e-money issuer as well as the largest crypto brokers in the Philippines. And this was kind of during COVID. So kind of found myself leading a crypto brokerage in Southeast Asia, and just really kind of, had to accelerate my learning and really kind of what was going on in the region from a crypto perspective. And that's sort of what eventually brought me to Coinbase. In the US, I'd also helped eToro launch their crypto brokerage, and then bought my first Bitcoin back in 2013. So I had been degenning nights and weekends for years and years before I built up enough conviction that this was an asset class and a technology that was here to stay, and then didn't look back.
Thank you.
I'll go next. Hi, I'm Stefano. I'm the COO of Longhash Ventures. We are a Web3 accelerator and VC fund based in Singapore. So my journey into Web3 is actually a little bit cheesy, and there's a lot of people in this space that have a similar story. I first heard about Bitcoin in, I think, sometime around 2012, and I was eating pizza somewhere in the CBD, and a friend of mine told me about it. And I don't remember what the price was. It was like $100 or $200, and I felt like I've totally missed it. Like, why would anybody buy digital money that's worth $200 a pop, right? And so I didn't pay too much attention to it. And then part of my career post INSEAD was in consulting. I was at McKinsey doing a lot of large-scale digital transformations. And at some point, kind of at the beginning of COVID, I took a 2-month break. And I was very curious about crypto. I think this was when DeFi summer was starting, and a lot of people were talking about it. And suddenly you were seeing the BTC and ETH prices on CNBC and Bloomberg. And I read the Bitcoin white paper, and it's surprisingly short. It's only 8 pages, so I was quite interested. I then started to get into DeFi, and I started to use things like Uniswap and Aave, and went through the pain of setting up a MetaMask wallet and funding it and whatnot. And I just realized how different and how much of a paradigm shift these very rudimentary and early stage Web3 applications were compared to some of the stuff that I was doing at McKinsey, which felt very incremental. And so at the end of this 2-month break, I called McKinsey. I quit on the spot. I didn't have anything lined up, but I just had very strong conviction that this was going to be the next big thing. And I wanted to be a part of it, and I wanted to be early. And so I then, after I quit, I kind of looked at, who is at the intersection of, Singapore crypto and ex-McKinsey, which was obviously kind of leveraging the network. And Longhash Ventures was the only firm that kind of fell into there. And so I joined initially also, funny enough, as a consultant for a couple of months, and that now has evolved into what I do today.
Thank you. It's an amazing story.
Hey everyone, I'm Harold. I am the venture builder for Standard Chartered Bank. So SC Ventures is the corporate venture arm of Standard Chartered Bank, and what we do basically is a little bit like Longhash Ventures. We do 3 things. One of them is innovation for the bank. Another one is invest in the fintechs of tomorrow, but as long as we have a use case for the bank. And we grow our own ventures. And so basically we grow from a simple idea all the way to the moment that it becomes a venture. And we have an entire program around that I run. In terms of Web3, so Web3, we, apart from my personal story, which is very similar to the ones of the others, which is, started with Bitcoin and then saw other potential applications that we could do for payment, for example, and whether at, for retail use case or institutional use case. And I think, what we realized at SC Ventures, I'm going to shift to SC Ventures, is that digital assets, we believe digital assets are here to stay. There is a use case for crypto, obviously. I think, we started with crypto, but it's a lot more today, and this is what we are focusing on at SC Ventures.
Hi, I'm Anton. I'm from KPMG. I've got two roles. I lead our innovation and fintech practice globally from Singapore, which is painful for time zones, and also run our FS business down here in the region. Love Standard Chartered Ventures, by the way. They're a really, really interesting firm and leader in their market here in Singapore for the globe. I've also taken away the sort of coaching point, quit McKinsey's. That seems like a good career move. So anyone wants to join McKinsey's, I'd tell you to quit them right now. Anyway, and incremental, he said it, right? Incremental, not strategic. But anyway, so where I come from is slightly different in that I'm working in the central banks right now. I've got 7 projects on the go where we're actually creating new forms of digital currency. We can talk a wee bit about that. We believe in that a lot. We believe in decentralized finance to a point. Not decentralized finance for decentralized finance as an outcome. We heavily focus on tokenization, like my colleagues from Standard Chartered Ventures. We can talk a bit about that as well. We believe that every asset that sits in the digital world needs to have a real economy asset attached to it. And then finally, stable coins and private market coins, they have their place as well. But specific use cases, so I'll raise that later on as well. But very much, I look at the wholesale markets and how we can change the wholesale markets to then improve the customer experience for consumers.
Yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, I worked in financial services and fintech for over 20 years at a whole bunch of big banks. And my last role was at Deutsche Bank, and I was responsible, I was like a global digital product leader, responsible for using new technology to improve our operational costs and build new revenue lines. And that involved, building new APIs, working with machine learning, a whole bunch of, emerging technology. And one of the things that fell on my plate, some 6 years ago was, hey, can you take a look at this blockchain stuff? Like, what do we need to do as a bank? And at the time, I was, not necessarily all in. But the more and more I got my head around it, engaging with the community by representing a bank, I learned a lot about the space. I understood the tech. I understood who the players were. And I really started to get very excited about the technology, the use cases, and the asset classes. And so I ended up joining a firm called Talos that is solving a problem in the space like many other vendors are. And it was a firm that I was RFQing for Deutsche Bank, actually. And I ended up saying, you know what, it's moving slowly at the banks. This industry moves so fast, and I want to be on the side of building the future plumbing and pipes and bridges. And so I made the leap and started up their APAC office. We're a global firm. Yeah.
Take the mic back, but not for too long, because you volunteered to actually explain the difference between what is Finance 2.0 and Web3. Tell us.
Okay. First of all, I didn't volunteer. But so look, I think I was one of only 2 people that appeared on the rehearsal group. No. So look, so the first thing I want to say is I'm not the biggest fan of the term Web3, okay? And I think before we start getting into all the meat of everything, it's always good to align people so that then we have a good baseline and then we can talk about specifics. But because Web3 and there's misnomers and things like that conjures up images of metaverses and VR and lines get blurred, I prefer to focus on digital assets and the underlying blockchain technology that powers them. And the reason why people are excited about this tech and these new asset classes when they consider what the future of finance is going to look like. So that's kind of what I would prefer to focus on. But the idea of Web3 builds on top of what I'm about to get into, where you have this idea of community-owned networks rather than networks, gateways, and platforms that are owned by a few big tech companies or a few banks, right? And a really good example is the SWIFT network, right? That the banks use to send money around globally. When you do a transfer, it goes across the SWIFT network. It's really slow. It's expensive. There are a whole bunch of middlemen collecting fees in the middle. And this is kind of what we're trying to talk about when we talk about the future of finance. And I'll get into it, right? So let's very quickly just say at a very high level, some of the things that I feel are broken or old in the old rails of finance and why people are excited about the future of it, right? And so when people try to, a really good example is sending money abroad from here to Brazil, or another one is access. If I want to access a bond or a private equity investment, there are minimum buy-ins, and the average guy on the street doesn't necessarily have access to those types of investment products. And another thing is transparency and efficiency. A lot of money is locked up in the global financial system because most purchases or trades take 2 or 3 days to settle. And so it's really inefficient because money is locked up all around the place. And so if I were to tell you that a technology came along, that solved a lot of these problems where you didn't need to use a middleman to transfer value, there was instant settlement, and you had the ability to offer new types of asset classes and via fractional ownership and improve this accessibility challenge, a lot of people at banks, investment firms would get interested. And that's why people are excited about the future of finance, because you're solving operational issues that are expensive for banks. You're solving capital and financing issues. How do you raise money in new ways? And you're solving this idea of new asset classes emerging that were previously very illiquid, now becoming tradable and accessible to a lot of people and everyday investors.
So I would agree to almost everything you said, except one, which is the community. Because it's what I hear all the time, which is basically you have the big financial institutions, and then you have the digital asset community. And as a matter of fact, TradFi and DeFi can coexist already, right? Because otherwise,
and I don't disagree with that.
And otherwise, simply you can't make the regulator move, right? You can't access the trillions of dollars of asset classes that you're talking about, because you do need, some of the big players.
Well,
on
there's
the market
relationships and distribution that the large banks and incumbents have always
had. But I think what you addressed is actually completely relevant, which is solving for inefficiencies, right? Which is creating capabilities that are good for people, right? And that instant settlement, for example. There's no reason why when I send, let's say, $100 to your point to Brazil, why 10% a fee should go to intermediaries, right? So, and solving for these issues actually makes sense, and I would say most of the big players would agree with that, actually.
Can I add a couple of things?
I just
here?
wanted to ask you, how does it make you feel to sit in the middle of this argument?
No,
it's not
good.
an argument. I'm just trying to explain.
So I thought absolutely sensible what you were saying in your Deutsche Bank heritage. You can see both sides, right? I have a problem with this sort of citizen developer sort of idea that the community will rise up and that the big organizations are evil and the little person who can design something on their Apple Mac is a good person. Generally, people make really bad products. I'm talking about consumers, right? And actually, big organizations like banks, a DB or a Coinbase or whatever, actually, they spend a lot of time trying to make good products, and so you've got to give them credit for that, right? But I agree with the inefficiency on the platform. So we look at things like cross-border FX. $27 trillion caught up at any one time in the whole sort of global FX community, right? Between banks and counterparties trying to trade on T+2, like 2 days or 3 days or a 1-day delay. 27 trillion, right? So if anyone wants to go and solve a problem in this room around Web3, target that. That's a big number that's meaningful, and you can really make a difference. So that inefficiency that Harold talked about, absolutely with you on that one. But I do worry, sometimes you get this kind of messianic zeal on one side of the equation. I have some friends who have ponytails, and they're in a firm called Materium. Look them up, they're really, really interesting. And what they do is they try and ascribe a digital identity to anything. A seat, a microphone, Star Trek collectibles, which is one of their biggest sellers. And they also believe that the sort of idea of atomic settlement around the world, that you can sort of transfer assets A to B to C. They're absolutely right. The work we did with, say, Gap, the big clothing company a wee while back, we looked at, to Harold's point, how inefficient is the supply chain? Well, 12.5% of the supply chain from producing cotton to us buying a shirt down the road is a waste of time. It is inefficiencies in the end-to-end supply chain. We looked at then creating a coin. Could we have a coin that went from a farmer in South Africa or whatever, right through to the end consumer? And the answer is yes, you can do that. But the problem is network effect, right? How do you scale that and make that something that is transferable for everybody, that actually is commercially viable, it's feasible to be able to run? And you quickly get into the problem. Gap's a big firm, although it's on decline at the moment, but you get into this problem of how do you scale that cost effectively? And what you end up with is a really cool coin and a really cool set of systems that actually cost more than the 12.5%. So one of the issues we have on the Finance 2.0 or the Web3 or whatever it might be is we're kind of in this interregnum right now. The technology exists, the use cases are known, but this is a shadow system that needs to evolve safely, and that costs a lot of money, and you still have to make a profit as you run a business, as you evolve a new set of systems and financial tools. And that is why blockchain since 2009, or Bitcoin, or the blockchain in 27, or Ethereum, whatever, that's why it hasn't taken hold just yet. It's a commercial issue, and it's a scaling issue of network effect. So I'm sure these guys are going to jump on in, right? But we've just got to get real sometimes about a social purpose and having a ponytail, as well as then actually real life, and actually how do we run our financial systems.
So I was going to add a few points when we're defining Web3 or crypto or whatever we're going to call it. I think to your point, I think it's very valid that a lot of the benefit, especially to enterprise and to existing incumbent businesses, comes from efficiency, lower cost, and so on. And to be fair, a lot of them are also fairly theoretical, because I think that the infrastructure is not there quite yet to match some of the existing infrastructure that is good, like Visa, MasterCard, and so on, PayNow, for example, and so on. Personally, I like the term Web3, but I like it because I think beyond efficiency and cost, I think it is in some ways also a bit of a philosophical paradigm shift, right? So yes, it's supposed to be more efficient. Yes, it's supposed to be cheaper. It's also meant to be permissionless, meaning that anyone and everyone can access it from anywhere, right? And the existing financial system, even Finance 2.0, is not like that, right? So that's one. I think the second...
But I would actually caution on the permissionless, simply because you will always need some level of oversight from someone. And oversight is actually good. Sorry, I'm putting my cap on, right? But I would say, and I'd love Coinbase's point of view actually on that one. But I would say if there had been a certain oversight from the regulator around FTX, we probably could have avoided a lot of things, right? And simple things like holding the asset, segregation of custody versus trading, these kind of things that actually Coinbase does, right? Would have been actually a good permission-based system to implement.
Sure. So I'll address what you said, and then I'll add my 2 points, and then I'll pass you the mic. So FTX is not crypto. FTX is not Web3. In the same way that NASDAQ is not a technology company, NASDAQ is a platform. FTX was a platform and has nothing to do with crypto or Web3. It's just a platform to trade digital assets. I know, spicy take, I know, but my point of view. But the other thing as well, I do believe that in the future there'll be two types of DeFi. There'll be clean DeFi, which will be probably KYC'd, which introduces a permission version of it. I believe there'll be let's call it a dirty DeFi, that is permissionless and where people still experiment and there's a lot more risks, right? But that was one point. So permissionless is one. I think the second one is it's also composable, right? So the idea is that you can go and build new things on top of existing open source protocols that you were not able to build in the past, right? So if you look at, the existing banking system, somebody wants to come and say, well, I want to tap into like some liquidity pools or want to build some cool thing on top of this, but I have to go and get to know you and set up a meeting and get access to the APIs and pay for them and all these kind of things. And with Web3, you don't have to do that anymore, right? The code is open source, and then you go in, you have your idea, you build on top of, whatever existing protocols exist. And I think the third one is that I think beyond the, the efficiency and the cost benefits that come from using, blockchain Rails, and whether it's, an institutional version of blockchain Rails or a permission version or so, I think there's a change in how, people will organize and people will govern themselves and entities, and it's already happening, right? So with a lot of, I think, traditional, VC, the idea was like the partner who led the deal would get a board seat, in the startup and whatnot, and then you have your closed-door board meetings and you make decisions and whatnot. And in Web3, it's completely open and transparent in the sense that the investors, hold certain voting power based on how much they invested and the tokens they have. If you want to make some kind of change or proposal to the team or the treasury management or the code or whatever, everything is done through an open forum. And you basically write what you want to do, and people give comments, they fight about it, and eventually you come together as a community to make things better for that. And I think these things will probably look very different in 5 or 10 years as the regulation catches up and as we get to a space where some of it has some oversight. But I think there'll be significant changes to what we have today.
Okay, wait. First, can you hear us well? Because there is a feedback on the stage. Yeah, all good?
Yeah, so since we're in an MBA setting, I'll build on what Summer and Anton sort of said previously. So I do think that right now, actually, especially we were talking about finance broadly, but it seems like we're talking about payments a little specifically. This is becoming a really fascinating race of whether the incumbents will find innovation before the startups will find distribution. Because I think, Summer, you had mentioned about Swift, for example. And I can tell you that a year and a half ago, I would not have expected anything from Swift around this, right? But the head of payments infrastructure for Swift, she's in Singapore, and I was talking to her, and if you've seen some of the recent pilots that they've been doing with Chainlink on CCTP and how they're trying to kind of bake in blockchains into their interoperable settlement network, this is kind of a spicy take, but I actually think in this one the incumbents are probably going to take it, because the crypto startup industry has been working at payments for 13 years now. Cross-border payments is the #1 thing that people think about when they think about what is blockchains good for, and so we are still here, right? And it's because I think it's not just about the technology, right? It's about actually policy is probably the bigger unlock that it still needs to kind of be worked through, and having kind of bigger sort of anchors with banks or just policy making bodies or even kind of these consortiums. I've been pleasantly surprised to see that they've been much more invested into this technology through the bear market. So despite all the negative headlines and all the whole FTX things that was happening, actually it was the banks and these consortiums and these policymakers that were actually really hard at work. So I'm hugely appreciative actually of all the kind of work that's been done on that. Next week at SFF, the World Bank president is down, the IMF president is down, and there's some pretty big announcements that are actually going to come out around that as well. So I actually think that payments may actually, the incumbents may actually take this one. So that's sort of where I'm seeing things. I think at a Coinbase level, we're fortunate that we kind of work across this kind of global platform. We have sort of consumers and retail distribution. We work with a lot of institutions, and then we work with developers as well. I think this point about hey, it's not as binary anymore, I think is also something that has kind of changed in terms of both narrative and kind of actual implementation. So things like KYC permissioning, right? So maybe I wouldn't call it clean DeFi. Maybe I would just call it not or dirty DeFi. Yeah, exactly. Not implying dirty DeFi on one side. But actually last week we released our kind of early preview of on-chain attestations. So Coinbase has kind of this KYC or verified user base in the hundreds of millions, and we're starting to actually kind of take those sort of attestations, tokenize them, and put them on Base, which is our layer 2. So it's not good enough for reliability, but even from kind of protocols and projects that want to at least start with some sort of proof of humanness or proof of verification from a reputable party, they can start ingesting that into their risk engines. So that's something that's happening in real time, which is really, really exciting to track.
I think maybe just to jump back on something that Samar said, I think what's really exciting what's exciting us specifically as a big financial institution right now is we started with crypto and we're moving to all the other asset classes that are enabled through blockchain. And you mentioned accessibility of certain asset classes like bonds. Why shouldn't like someone who has very low income have access to a sovereign bond? Why should it only be accessible to an accredited investor? So I think these are some pain points that actually Web3 can solve for, and something we're quite excited about.
So let's talk about what are the blockers and drivers for our industry, the way you see it, and also because you touched on that point, I think it will be very useful for the audience if you talk about the specific use cases which either your company is doing, something that people in this room can test at any moment, sending crypto through text messages, through Coinbase, or some of the use cases which you mentioned, like governmental bonds, what you work on.
Yeah, I can start. So yeah, in terms of the obstacles, so our firm only looks at institutions, and so we provide solutions to institutions on the buy side and on the sell side. And I can talk about like what the blockers are to to mass adoption, right? And so look, the first, maybe over the last 5 years, what's changed is that a lot of the technology and infrastructure limitations have been overcome. In the past, when you were a big organization and you said, okay, how do I hold this asset class and move it without getting hacked, to have this confidence of not circumventing anti-money laundering, how do you trade and connect to these new exchanges? All of those problems hadn't been solved. Now, in my personal opinion, they've been solved at an institutional grade. There are really good providers out there that can service a bank or a hedge fund. So that's one. I think the big one, and the one that everyone in this room knows about, is where there isn't parity globally, is on the regulation side, right? So, for example, what we've seen is a lot of crypto funds and some broker dealers have come into the space, but you're not seeing large asset managers and endowments and pension funds come in yet, because everyone's waiting on the sidelines, a bit freaked out about pissing off their local regulator. And the regulators in different jurisdictions all have they're all at a different stage in their journey. Some are more forward-thinking, and others are more political. And like in the US right now, things are a little bit shaky, but there have been some small victories and progress. Whereas in a place like Singapore or Hong Kong or Switzerland, you've had banks that have been offering full-scale digital asset services for years. And so those are the two obstacles that I would kind of mention, but I'm sure there are others.
I think there's another one around interoperability, and I think that's I don't want to get too technical based on the audience, but obviously if you're one bank, you may decide to go under one specific blockchain. If you're another bank, you'd rather not do public blockchain, so you're going to have set up on private blockchain. Some will use Ethereum, some will use EVM, some will use Stellar, et cetera, et cetera. And I think going back to what you were saying around the regulator, it's a real headache, actually, for the regulator. Because while they want to enable that technology, the fact that every big financial institution and every big asset manager has decided to do their own way creates a little bit of a headache for them.
We're talking about overall blockers and drivers, not only regulators. They're an important point, and I think Anton is the best person in the room probably to talk, to continue talking about the same topic, but also to touch on the point of the regulators. If there will be one point in the world that will adopt blockchain technology, enable it through the reg perspective and so on, and where it will be in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mentioned the central banks earlier on. They're definitely on the march, and again, don't think of them as retrograde. Think of them as trying to ensure, number one, the stability in the market. We don't want to be in a bad place. And for those people around in 2008, yeah, that wasn't a good time, right? So stability is number one, customer protection is number two, consumer protection. But they're all trying to work out, as all of us are right now, that's why we're in this learning session, how do we make this work, right? So they're all sort of trialing ideas and technologies and using different providers and using partners, some of which might be on the stage here, to help them sort of work through that. And we'll see off the back of that, primarily I think a focus on, again, wholesale markets initially, which then those wholesale technologies will then come into our consumer lives as well. So that's a really, really good thing. I love the MAS. Part of the reason I moved to Singapore 2.5 years ago was because of the kind of innovation halo that MAS and the government has here. And one of the great projects that they've put up recently, you're smiling, but yeah, they pay me money. One of the great projects I've had recently is on Guardian, which probably Harold can talk about, some others as well, where they're trying to take those traditional products that we have in financial services, mortgages, for example, or trade finance, and put those into kind of a digital asset, tokenized version. And that comes back to the consumers like us that want to invest in our livelihoods or our pensions, or later on in life we've got fractionalized new assets that we can go after. I think that's really, really exciting. But you've got to think about it like a patchwork quilt. There is no amazing DeFi for the world. It'll never happen. It'll never, never happen. But little elements of the ecosystem, they can start to switch. Now, an element might be my home country, New Zealand, or Singapore, or Saudi Arabia, or an element might be cross-border remittances that was mentioned earlier on. These little parts will start to then come together, and I think Harold's point on interoperability is really well made. The weakness on patchwork quilt, which is reality of how it's going to work, is we don't have the same rules, standards, and systems and communication protocols between these chains or off-chain elements right now. So that is the one weakness. The final thing I'd say, and obviously, Hassan, you've obviously got some insights into the big announcements, but we do see cross-border cooperation between the regulatory communities. The most notable one that I'm very excited about, Europe to Singapore, Asia to Singapore, Asia to Europe. And then the other way is US into Singapore over to Africa. A lot of this was around war for resources and stability in the world. But I'm very excited about that, because if we can get a whole market like the EU to trade with us here in Singapore as a trusted nation, and then we can trade with ASEAN, for example, that's a big, big game changer for all of us. And it will kind of infer a little bit on the regulatory kind of standardization, and it will infer also then we've got more developers in those markets working in a cohesive way to generate the outcomes that people want to see. But I'm sure other people got views as well.
Yeah, I can just add on quickly. So I think that this point about policy is as important as people are saying. I think for us, when we think about kind of what are the big unlocks and the things that Coinbase is really focused on, it's policy, scalability, supporting utility, and then accessibility. But I think on policy, just the thing I'll add is, so again, during kind of all the FUD and the negative headlines, regulators have been hard at work. And we sort of surveyed recently that 83% of G20 and major financial hubs already either have a crypto licensing framework or in the process of issuing one. So that clarity actually is emerging. I mean, the US, I think, just gets too much mind share around this and clouds everything else. But actually, between MiCA and what MAS has over here and all that, it's actually fantastic progress. Even for stablecoins, we're seeing kind of fit for purpose frameworks that are coming up now. I think UK announced either this morning or yesterday. So that's, we joked like we're actually a policy shop this year that's making products on the side, but it is just that important to get right. I think the other kind of topic, just to shift gears a little bit, is around just infrastructure and scalability. So again, this is something that the kind of crypto community, the blockchain community has to deliver in order to operationalize everything else. So where kind of blockchains are today, we're starting to go from the dial-up era to the broadband era, and that's happening through kind of layer 2s on top of Ethereum, as well as alternative layer 1s that are taking fundamentally different approaches to solving the scalability trilemma. But all this experimentation is very, very healthy, right? So we're kind of in the game with Base, which is our layer 2 kind of blockchain on top of Ethereum. I specifically kind of call out Solana as probably one that's going to hit escape velocity on the Alt L1 framework. Even kind of Bitcoin, which was somewhat given up as a dinosaur, to be honest, is having a renaissance right now with figuring out how to put smart contracts back on. So I do think that kind of race is extremely important, because that then allows for all of these other use cases, finance and Web3, to start coming online at scale in a way that doesn't really happen today. It's like hobbies plus, but now we're starting to get into the big leagues.
Real use cases, what SCV is working on?
So maybe I'll just go back just a little bit on what we do at SC Ventures. So we invest in 4 ecosystems, and digital asset is one of our entire ecosystem. So we were early investors in Ripple, for example, so going back to cross-border payment. I think it's probably the first blockchain to have really initiated that aspect. We invested in a company that was doing physical custody of tokens, which was Metaco, which we did an exit earlier this year. So we continuously invest in that space. What we see a lot today is around tokenization. So what these guys are talking about is really about tokenization and what tokenization enables. So it's a little bit the buzzword, like Gen AI is the buzzword right now. Tokenization of real world assets. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that notion. Yeah, we could probably tokenize anything, but does anything need to be tokenized? Probably not, right? So these are some of the use cases. We're looking at I would say also the possibilities that stable coins, or what we recently coined as flat coins, as a way to democratize even further specific real world asset tokens, right? So these are some areas that we're really interested in, and on top of many others like instant settlement, clearing, and so forth.
Is this a favorite project question? No?
Oh, this is still blockers and drivers of the industry, and then the real use cases.
I keep on thinking about that answer because I have a good answer for that, but I guess that'll come later. Yeah, no, I think so. So going back to blockers and drivers.
I know you want to talk about the pendants, right?
Okay. No, I think what you mentioned on infra and scalability, and you mentioned it too, fully resonates, right? And I think to bring abstract concepts to life, I think an example, and it happened to quite a few people, and actually I know somebody in the audience who had this experience, and I'm looking at him, is that during the bull and the height of 2021, when people were trying to do trades on some DeFi platforms on Ethereum, you'd be trading $100 worth of whatever and paying $200 in fees to do it, and waiting an hour or so to get it settled, right? Which is completely not what it should be like, right? And I think solving that for finance, but also solving it for a lot of the other use cases around gaming, social, and so on is quite important. And that's a big area for or a big part of our investment thesis, right? I think another one is UI UX, and I think that of course you have some solutions like Coinbase, for example, that has an amazing app. It's super sleek, super easy to use. But if you look at some of the other alternatives that are decentralized and self-custodial, it's a complete mess, right? So you need to, first of all, set up a MetaMask. If anybody here has set up a MetaMask, you need to memorize 12 to 24 words. Maybe do what I do, which is write them down on a piece of paper and then put them in a safe somewhere, in a basement or something. And then you have to fund it as well. So you need to figure out how to actually put money onto it, which usually you might actually go through Coinbase. And then eventually you get to where you want to get to, and then when you're trying to do transactions, it's just like the experience as somebody who hasn't done it before is quite scary, and especially scary because you're dealing with money and value, right? And so you're approving transactions and whatnot that don't make sense to most people, right? Because a lot of this stuff is not really human readable. So I think that's a big one for users. I think, but at the same time, it's also a big one I think from a UX perspective for developers, because we're so early in the ecosystem that there's really, in some ways, like no standards, right? So you have, like the Ethereum ecosystem, which is using Solidity as a coding language, if you will, with a particular architecture. Then you have, Cosmos, which is using a different language with a completely different architecture. You have, Solana, Polkadot. They're all using very different languages, very different architectures, and even as a developer, it's very challenging to try to build something that can be scalable beyond the whatever number of people are using DeFi every day to billions of people, because technically it's very hard, and that is also something that we're investing in to try to solve.
Hello? Yeah. Just in case it's not clear, right? Because we're moving around quite a lot. And the reason why I like the term digital assets is that, using the underlying technology of blockchain, different assets have emerged, and they're at different stages of their maturity. You could think about maybe the first one being Bitcoin, and then a whole bunch of other cryptocurrencies. And then people are like, well, what's the use case of them, right? And so while Bitcoin in itself has become something of a inflation hedge and is actually being seen as an asset class by institutions, almost like gold, some of the other cryptocurrencies are almost like investing in VC projects, but many of them have not yet come to fruit. You have hedge funds and investors who are getting rich quickly or trading the volatility to make money, but that's not really a use case yet, right? So it remains to be seen which cryptocurrencies end up winning and which ones die off, right? That's one. Then there's this idea of stable coins, which is almost like tokenized money, which is very powerful because people are realizing, wow, I can settle instantly, and this thing is almost the equivalent of a US dollar. So that's already like in our system today and solving a lot of problems. You go for that next. And then you've got this, what we've been talking about, the tokenized real-world assets, where you're starting to have any kind of asset class represented on a blockchain and bringing the benefits like liquidity, instant settlement, etc. And then you've got like other esoteric types like NFTs, but I don't want to get into that.
We've got central bank digital currencies as well, right? So that's our, just to let you know, that's our money. That's our money, right? We're taxpayers. Where the central banks, on behalf of the commercial banks, issue a digital version of what we would call currency right now. And obviously that'll have certain elements to it in terms of its coding and smart contracts, but it makes it better than a piece of paper that we pick up from the ATM. Sorry, Harold,
maybe just on because you may have heard of stable coins, but you don't really know what they are. So I think back to what Samar was saying. So they're just, in a sense, they're just almost like a currency that backs up your token. And there's three ways. There's one I would recommend, which is algorithmic. So you might all remember Luna. This is definitely not a good way to...
recommend? Yeah, we're getting to Luna as well.
I would not recommend. Then you have asset-backed stablecoins, so backed by actual assets, and then reserved-backed, which are backed by an actual currency, right? So we have a preference, obviously, for reserved or asset-backed stablecoins.
Okay, so talking about Luna, building up on that, in the last 2 years, it was like a really big coverage in the news for everyone who doesn't work in this industry, and we work there, so we all know what's really happening, we know why we believe in it, we know what's going to happen in the future in terms of what is the potential in the industry, but people who don't work there daily, they just watch the news, right? So what's the impact from your perspective on the coverage on disasters like Luna, 3 Arrow Capital, FTX, and so on? We're not going to mention all of that. I can see you already. Wait, you're boiling. Wait a second. And what's the impact of these last 2 years on the sentiment from the clients, whatever your clients are, institutional guys, again, regulators, retail clients? What is your perception on this whole thing?
I think, I mean, it's been pretty terrible. 2022 was just, it felt like every 3 months or every quarter, there was just like, you know, worse news and worse news. And when you thought we were at the bottom and it couldn't get any worse, it just kept on getting worse. And for those who don't have the context, so basically, like Harald said, Luna was this algorithmic stablecoin, so a coin that was pegged to the US dollar based on code that didn't work. And so, like, I think $40 billion were lost in like 48 hours. And then a few months later, this supposedly $18 billion hedge fund based in Singapore suddenly imploded and was like, I don't know, $3 or $6 billion in debt. And then obviously FTX crashed. So I think, I mean, in many ways, as much as I was saying that I don't consider FTX to be crypto or Web3 because it was a platform. It was actually a very good trading platform. As a trading platform, it was actually amazing. But obviously they did a ton of illegal things and scams and whatnot. But I think it really set the industry back quite a bit because one, obviously regulators suddenly started to pay attention and not in the right way, rather than what they should have been doing, which is like engage early, understand the technology, figure out how the policies would need to change and adapt to this. Suddenly they're now having this knee-jerk reaction and expected to come down and punish the industry as a whole, right? So I think that's one. I think second, obviously, there was over the course of, I don't know, late 2020, 2021, and into 2022, there was increased institutional investor interest into the space. So you had, pension funds and all types of asset managers, pouring money into the space through VCs, through direct investments, through a whole bunch of different ways, and a lot of that dried up, right? So towards the end of 2022, a lot of that basically dried up, and people got really scared and started to look at basically other sectors, right, for investment. And I think that then the last one is also like for the users too, right? Because at the end of the day, of course, it's good to have the money flowing in and new ventures being backed and so on, and liquidity coming in, which is important. But you also need users, right? And you can't just have degens, however number, I think there's 30,000 or so people that are actually still active in this. Maybe the number is totally wrong. I don't know what the number is, but it's a small number. And what we need is users, right? I think a lot of, like you said, I mean, people watch the news, they watch Bloomberg or so, and they say, oh, FTX, the downfall of crypto, and it's everything is a scam, and it's quite I think it's been quite tough for the industry.
I mean, what I would add to that is, for sure, the reputation of the industry took a step back. A lot of institutions that were coming in, backed off. But there were some key learnings here, right? So first of all, there were some good things that happened. There were a lot of scammy companies around that kind of died off, and consolidation that occurred, which meant that a lot of companies that are actually trying to do responsible, sustainable businesses are the ones who are left around today. The second thing is a lot of people educated themselves properly on what custody is and how to segregate that from trading and some basics that have existed in financial institutions for hundreds of years, and doing more responsible risk management. So these are the lessons learned. And just remember, this is a nascent industry with growing pains. Some of the issues that happened were just standard frauds, and that's unfortunate. People got greedy and they just committed fraud. It wasn't a problem with the underlying tech itself. Those are some of the other things I would add to that.
I'll add a couple other learnings. I remember last year's Singapore FinTech Festival, I think you guys were there, right, the Coinbase and all that. The main message was rebuild trust as an industry. So trust in the institutions, both the legacy ones that are playing as well as the new economy ones as well. So people need to be a lot more transparent about how they operate, how they work. That was a key thing. And I think it's still work in progress, to be open with you. I think, secondly, retail investors shouldn't be allowed to play with stuff they don't know about. And so our regulator here has stopped advertising for these sorts of things, unless, of course, you know what you're doing and you go to someone who can actually provide you with advice. When you think about it, we do that in normal life outside of the amazing world of crypto already, right? If we need financial advice, we'll go and see someone who's professional and we'll get that advice. And I don't think it's any different on cryptographically hashed coins or other types of assets. The other one is liquidity. And this is one of the things, again, I worry about with decentralized finance is we need to have a certain buffer of money that sits underneath all of these transactions. Why? Because things go wrong. And we have bad people in the world, lots of them running around who commit fraud, not just people with crazy haircuts who've gone to jail recently. So that's one. And then secondly, there will be shocks in the system. No matter what we say, the world is not a perfect algorithm. And so we need those buffers of liquidity to help keep trading as these sort of decentralized finance or partially centralized ecosystems work. That was a good thing, I think. The reason that banking is set up with so many central counterparties, it is spaghetti, right? And it's a bit old and all that sort of stuff, get all that. But the reason there are buffers in there and the things like custodians, etc., is to build trust and to build liquidity in the system. So when things go wrong, we're not out of pocket, or an SME is not out of pocket because it hasn't received its income from goods that's been sold. And so I welcome that, and I think that's still work in progress with a lot of the crypto native firms. That they're going to have to be charged, they're going to have their own liquidity reserves if they want to operate and play with essentially what is money. I don't know, you must have a view from Coinbase?
I think the meme is generally true that crypto is speedrunning finance. I think we've basically rediscovered all the wisdom that the financial system had to kind of inculcate, over the decades. And it is what it is, right? And it's open and permissionless, and that's kind of how it plays out. I think just one maybe tangible example to kind of add on just from my own personal experience as well. So we at Coinbase Singapore, we applied for the license from the MAS over here, and we've kind of gone through that licensing journey. In fact, we just received our full MPI license from the MAS last month, and it's been a 2-year kind of journey. So last year at SFF, FTX kind of blew up the week after. So us along with a whole bunch of other firms that were kind of mid-process at that time. I think that the cool thing is that actually, I mean, the MS kind of sort of, took that into account, took some calculus, and they actually came out with like a consult very, very quickly, after that of, hey, what are some enhanced regulations and protection measures we need to put in place so that something like this doesn't happen again? Fool me once kind of a thing. So, while a lot of the kind of core, regulations focus on AML as like the starting point, so now, consumer protection, investor protection is starting to come into sort of the next wave. And so things like, asset segregation, trust constructs, those are all things, especially for kind of CFI type companies, they are, they're going to be here, and that's a good thing. And that's what like good actors also want is clear rules, upholding these core principles, and then we will kind of go on from there.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful comment on the blockers and drivers and what's going to happen in the future potentially and what's the impact for the last 2 years. And we can continue talking, I have another list of questions, and I know that this panel would love to continue arguing and sharing their experience, but we're open for questions. Who wants to ask? Please, go ahead.
Hello. Hi, does this work? Thanks so much for the passion. I really enjoyed the back and forth. I have a question around the bridge between, let's say, Web 2 and Web 3. So people who are used to an e-commerce environment and don't necessarily care about permissionless, interoperability, all of the nice questions that we have to solve, right? So we've been working on a wine and spirits investment fund, so tokenizing wine and spirits to increase provenance. But to pitch that to a traditionally Web 2, my dad, myself, 40, 50 plus, is very difficult to explain just why, what the concept is, etc. So what are you guys seeing, not necessarily from an institutional perspective, but maybe more like, what are the front runners to bridge the gap, right, I would say, between Web 2 and Web 3? What are the things that we should be looking out for or reading up on?
Yeah, I'm happy to start there. And Julia, I was going to say, I don't know if we made your job harder or easier by being, this spirited. So I think that there's a topic of accessibility and how to make sort of, crypto ready for the mainstream that I don't think we got as much chance to touch on. There's been a lot of work that's been happening again behind the scenes on how do you make the custodial or self-custodial experience easier? Because things like, generating a seed phrase, storing it, it might be great for certain kinds of use cases, but for more Web 3-ish light stuff, it's not kind of where you want to be. So I think a couple of the tangible things that the industry's been working on. So one is this sort of technical term called multi-party compute wallets. That basically is like a semi-custodial wallet, which lets you allow in a custodial environment and then transition over to self-custodial when you're ready, just like taking training wheels off. So the platform can generate the key for you and then store it, and then you basically co-sign it so that you also don't lose custody of your property if you don't want. There's also things like account abstraction or smart contract wallets, and the big kind of thing there to me honestly is this notion of the cold start problem that I need to have ETH or Matic or something of the native unit before I can actually generate a transaction. So kind of in the payments world, there's a concept called paymasters. So being able to sponsor someone's transactions. Those are all, again, just more at a kind of technical and level, that's all starting to come together so that for Web 2 type kind of mainstream tech platforms, you can create back-end wallets and you can start consumers on that journey without them hopefully never even having to know, right, that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, what I would add to that very quickly is that it kind of touches on the UX UI thing that Stefano mentioned, which is we are working in so much detail today at the lower levels, arguing about which blockchain's better for which use case, and L1, L2, etc. What I envision happening is once some of these things are solved and some really great use cases and momentum and mass adoption happens, what will happen is there will be this abstraction layer that above it, where no one who's interacting with this world is thinking about the pipes that have built it. It's just happening in a way that's giving you the benefits, like the instant settlement and not needing to work with a central intermediary to conduct some kind of transaction or work on some kind of platform, but without having to think about it, you're just given an API or a user interface, and in the back end, it's taken care of.
And I was going to add, so I agree. I think it's a little bit on the UI and the device that you're going to use. I think ultimately it's accessibility of your asset, right? And how quickly and how easily you can have access to your own asset. And I think that's where we're slowly going to be moving. We shouldn't wait, 3 days to be able to have access to the asset that we invested in, right? So this is where we think the industry is going to move in, the coming months and years.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Kayin. Would you see the banks coming in with their own coins eventually and normalize the market?
Yeah, so so maybe one thing I don't want to self-promote, right? But so I'll stay away from that. But one of the banks that Samar was working for previously joined what's called a UDPN network, and that's something that my bank as well has been involved with. So it's finding connections among the banks so that we can settle easily and pass assets easily and so forth, right? So I think that's one thing. Some banks are issuing their own stablecoins, so that's also going to happen, more and more.
Can I just add to that? JP Morgan, for example, right? JP Coin, actually based here in Singapore, right? They run the whole thing here in Onyx. It's very cool. The demand issue is one that they're suffering from at the moment. So can they issue a coin? Awesome, yes. Can they get anyone to use it? No. So there's a couple of things to think about here as well. One is the technology is awesome, but we've got to go back to use cases as well. And also got to think around how practical it is to adopt some of these things. So JP Morgan, big treasury bank, right? Think around treasurers around the world and moving currencies and the atomic settlement and all that sounds very, very cool. But the ability to change that, change the spaghetti they have right now and move into this new world, it's near on impossible. So this is going to take some time. The large banks can issue the coins, but I think Citi, JP, I don't know about what Standard Chartered's doing. They're suffering from a lack of demand, and these things are not making any money. And then, of course, you've got the US regulators pressing down hard, which is never a good thing.
I would just add to that, so from visiting my old McKinsey colleagues in the Bay Area, that at least in the US, there's definitely banking firms that are experimenting with having their own private blockchains, right? Because I know we talked about permissionless and all that, but you can have your own private blockchain used internally for things like, like trade finance, for example, right? And used maybe between the bank and the other bank and the parties in the middle and all that, and then actually using Ethereum as the ultimate settlement layer, right? So meaning that you're conducting all these different transactions within your own chain, right? And you optimize your chain for that, but ultimately you actually record it onto Ethereum as a settlement layer. Also been hearing that a lot of banks are looking at some of the DeFi platforms or applications and trying to understand how could they either adopt it or adapt it for their own needs, right? I know Aave was one that was mentioned. So Aave is basically a lending platform. And there's a few banks in the US that are looking at like how can they either use their institutional version or try to build something similar that obviously would comply with whatever regulations they need to comply with.
Do we have more questions? Okay, Barry.
Taking on board Anton's point a little bit, and I don't think you banks can migrate. You just got to do the pain and start something new. I mean, about 30 years ago back in NZ, there was a bank called the ASB, and they had two systems, bad bank, good bank, right? And overnight, they just swapped it. Why do you guys keep saying that I need to migrate, I need to adapt or something, given the way the technology is? Who's going to go into the depths of the dungeons of banks and dare tamper with the systems that are so old, so legacy, so regulated?
So, I mean, I could take a stab at it. When I was at Deutsche, I was in the corporate bank, and obviously, like, trillions is flowing through every day. What happens is you have a lot of opposing forces, right? So, you have a team that says, hey, there's this new technology that's revolutionary. It's going to be better for everyone and humanity. And then at the same time, you've got the head of IT saying, hey, but we need money for our COBOL developer who's running a mainframe that's actually running the global financial system right now. And then both of us go to the CEO, and the CEO is like, wait a minute, I don't want another scandal. I've got 5 more years. Maybe we just window dress a bit and then carry on business as usual. So there's a lot of complicated politics at play within large banks. I'm not dogging banks because they're actually doing really solid work. It's just that it's not as easy as we might think, given the amount of flow coming through these old pipes, and switching over to the new one is very scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, not much to add. I agree.
Can I add one thing? So I worked with a bank called HSBC a wee while back, and they had this guy called Leighton Dooley, who's another Kiwi, right? He's the only guy who could program their old trade finance system. I think it was Fortran or COBOL or whatever. He retired, he was 63, so back to New Zealand, see you later from London. The regulator rang up HSBC in London and said, get him back. I don't care what you do, bring him back, key man risk, no one can program the system anymore. So here's an idea for everyone in the room, it's counterintuitive. Learn the old programming languages, Fortran, Pascal, COBOL. You'll make a ton of money because everyone is, honestly, everyone is retiring it right now and all of our systems are based on that. So it's a bit counterintuitive.
COBOL and Solidity, not Python. I think that's the theme of this.
No, but the reality is you know, the legacy system is there. It's true for banks, but it's true for telcos. It's true for a lot of industries. And just touching one bit of code would have a major impact, right? So instead of, you know, rebuilding everything, you probably want to build on top so that you don't rely as much on your legacy system, and yeah, rely on new modes of function.
There's a place called Venice, and you know what's happening there, don't you? It's sinking.
Okay, I think it's time for us to wrap up the panel, and I want to thank you guys all for sharing the real cases about the cobalt and all of that stuff. So we talk about the innovative ways and improving the world with the technology, which is innovative as blockchain. Before that, we covered AI. But actually, it sometimes comes down to someone who knows the only language which still runs the underlying system within the global banking ecosystem. Yep.
Can I make one final advert for next week? So Singapore FinTech Fest, which was talked about before, everyone should know that's on in town out at Changi Expo. There's free tickets. You just go online and ask for a trade pass. You don't have to pay anything, right? And you can get pretty much access to most of stuff there apart from one or two big stages. If you're really interested in this space, there's some awesome panels. I don't know if some people might be on the panels already. There's one which is great, which is the stablecoin guys are having a fight with the central bank digital currency guys around who's going to win. Effectively, you know, the old world versus the new world. I highly recommend going to those sorts of things. I think you'll like it. And you get pretty much the best of the world here next week in Singapore for free. So yeah, do sign up if you haven't signed up already and come along, you enjoy it.
A great word of advice. Thank you so much for participating here. Thank you.